wholeheartedly welcome each one of you to the 7th anniversary of T Hub Foundation, the world's largest innovation campus. Today, we're all gathered here to reflect upon the last 7 years of T Hub. 7 years of immeasurable growth, success stories, accomplishments, and an experience of a lifetime. T Hub and its people have always believed in the wise words of Mr. Ratan Tata, a very famous saying which I'm sure everyone in this room is aware about. And I quote, "If you want to walk fast, walk alone. But if you want to walk far, walk together." And with this motive in our hearts, T Hub has completed 7 years this very day. This very enthusiasm led to the coalition of startups, corporates, governments, mentors, and ecosystem enablers under one roof as the world's largest innovation campus. On this note, with utmost pleasure and joy, I welcome you all once again to the 7th Foundation Day of T Hub.
There'll be a lot of takeaways for all of you. Right. So without further ado, I'd like to now call on stage Srini, Anu, and Sandeep to get the show started.
So maybe we could start with you, Anu, talking just a little bit about your journey and what brought you to Map My Genome today.
Sure. Thanks, Srini. And thanks, Anissa, for calling us the three favorite people. The rest are not. So I started my journey 22 years ago. This was around the year 2000 when the human genome was just getting completed. I had absolutely no idea what genomics was just a year before that. But I think it sounded fascinating, and I took that journey forward. So from there, we ended up becoming, did 3 international acquisitions, became one of the largest genomic services players worldwide. I went through this journey again as being an entrepreneur. Second time around was that second time around, I felt that there was a need to be able to create data for the Indian genome because we are 1/6 of the world's population. The amount of data that was available for us to move forward a decision was pretty much 0.0%. So I think that was the motivation. Started off in 2013 with that. And over a period of time, we have now been able to create strong brands in this space, both on the preventive genomic side as well as on the clinical side, so which basically means your DNA and understand what that really says about you. Could be about understanding where you came from, what your body says about your health, and as a result, wealth. But also to be able to understand if there is something that we can help them from a medical perspective. So that's a little bit in short, since you really give a short answer.
That's a very impressive. And that's just a little lot.
First of all, very good afternoon. Huge congratulations to the Foundation team. I think I can definitely say a full group here says that T-Hub has been successful to pulling all entrepreneurs on a Saturday afternoon. That means something is right here. Huge applause to all the founders who are here, and huge applause to the T-Hub because I'm so honored to be here on part of this special day. This is also very interesting. It's also 7th anniversary for me about when I got into my startups very seriously. And just to introduce myself, I'm Sudhir, and I started my career as a software engineer, like many of you probably be here. When I was for my master's, got into some large companies like AT&T, Microsoft, Merrill Lynch, and everything, and then very soon got into startups that went in public. And I've seen the journey of state startups and kind of all the way to the public. During this journey, we acquired 6 companies ranging from $20 million to $200 million. And that gave me a different lens to see the startups. How can you've been sitting on both sides of the table of M&A, right? We got acquired and we acquired many companies, we went public. This was a very fantastic journey for me. Once we went public, we did not suit me well because I was a startup guy. I quit that very comfortable business class job and then got into again started as a founding member and CTO of another company called Shortlets. That was started up to 7 years ago when T-Hub was started. And when I was thinking about building the teams, always all of my successful and previous startups have been with the talent in India. That was always a thread that was flowing throughout my career for the last 20 years. Like any company, very usual, in fact, any company that I had a talent in India that was really the backbone of the success of the company. And when I wanted to kind of think about this, I got my US citizenship green card. When I say I moved to India, people think I probably did not get my H1 anymore. I got my citizenship. And then I said, like, should I go to Hyderabad or Bangalore? Everybody was saying you should go to Bangalore. And I started to hear about T-Hub and the whole ecosystem that's coming up in Hyderabad. And I said, well, if I'm from Hyderabad, if I cannot go to Hyderabad, who can I go? And then I said, I moved here. I moved here for good. And I've never regretted my decision. It's always easy to build startups. A lot of startups are about taking something challenging and building on top of it. And manage a lot of remote engineering teams across multiple continents, multiple companies. That's what you get out of the whole VC, what you get out of M&A. You hire a lot of companies, you have to hire a lot of companies, and that's better. But all of these things also through the curveball in terms of management and remote engineering management, which is a feature of corporate qualities today. Today, I'm a founder of Insightly Analytics, which is helping software engineers to build their productivity. And I'm based out of Hyderabad, and I keep traveling to San Francisco and Hyderabad very hard to be there.
Thank you. So, rather than doing the typical panel where I just ask each one individual questions, we're going to turn this more into a conversation. And what we want to explore is the ecosystem itself. How do you take advantage of it? But also, how far has Hyderabad come, and where do we still have to go? What's left, and those gaps, right? So, for both of you, Anu, you started your second gig, the Map My Genome, in 2013. And today you're talking about 7 years ago with Shortlist. What was Hyderabad like in those years? Let's just, for a lot of these people, it looks like, we've got lots of young entrepreneurs here, people who just started the last couple of years. It's very different today to what it was 7 years ago, 10 years ago, right? Would either of you like to talk about what it was like in those days?
So I can tell that in 2000 when we were moving to India, I think High-Tech City was coming, the first town. And so we said, yes, that's the place we want to be. Then we found it was too expensive. Not happening. I just think that if 20 years ago we had T-Hub, there was no other, I don't think I would be thinking about the choice. Right? You would start with something like T-Hub. Because it's just ready, it's ready for you to move in, you're ready to get started. But I think, at that point of time, we had to think about everything, go around, find buildings where you could even start thinking, even from a logistics point of view. So I think a lot of people who come in today and you see a ready-made ecosystem, it was very different in those days. Even in 2013, it wasn't as well developed as it is today. So, and for us, Awesome to Map My Genome, because we were able to incubate Map My Genome within those premises. But it was not easy for everybody else. So I think today having this kind of an entire infrastructure, but also mentors and support system, I think really helps. And I wish I had that, but we didn't at that time. My third one maybe.
I will answer it in the most easiest possible. I'll try. When I was trying to hire my first team for the startup 7 years ago, people were like, if it was startup, I want to join the startup. I really like the work, but I'm sure I will not be able to get married. That was the response I used to get from engineers who wanted to join the startup 7 years ago. Today, for my current startup, Insightly Analytics, today when I wanted to hire somebody, they're super passionate about being a founding member of a startup. They understand the startup. They understand what success has shown to a couple of other startups who have been there. A couple of them went public, Freshworks and all of them which went public, created a lot of success for young entrepreneurs. People are understanding the whole ecosystem and the value of startups and also the value of ESOPs. It's very easy to explain now. It has a huge change. It has been a very big change, I would say.
Right, absolutely. In fact, T-Hub started on the IIIT campus. Back in those days, the ecosystem was really small. We had maybe 5 incubators in the whole state. We had one angel investing group. We had one VC, and a handful of programs, Startup Weekend, Startup Saturday, etc. And at IIIT, first of all, they managed to get together a lot of different entrepreneurs into one campus, and then helped each other out. It was much more about how do we help founders to help each other than about us making that individual difference. But the truth was, the reason why T-Hub came up, and also why it became successful, was because there wasn't a uniting force. There wasn't one place that you could go to try and understand what's going on in this ecosystem or help founders to scale. At the heart of all of the stuff that T-Hub does, and this amazing team that MSR is leading is continuing that work, is just to make the connections necessary for startups to succeed. You can't forget that part of it. But we're all part of that ecosystem, and today I think it's a lot more mature. And the fact that, people like yourselves, with all the experience you have, became entrepreneurs, speaks volume to that part. Just one thing, Anu, you were talking about, when we were talking backstage, you were talking about the perception of Hyderabad as well. How do you think that's changed from what it was to now?
Sure. So I remember many times, I think when you tell someone you're running a genomics company, the first assumption is you're from Bangalore, if not from the US. The second thing was, I remember the first time I was giving, every time I would give my business card and it said Hyderabad, they would say, please change your address, nothing else, right? So that was the perception at that point. I think today that perception has changed wildly. And I remember even from in 2000, when we were just starting off, I would go to the US, we would pretend to be a US company because we did have a US entity first, but it was that you'd go from here, you wanted to be a US company and then have a back end in India. I think today it is very well accepted to have headquarters in Hyderabad and then have your subsidiaries, and we were able to acquire companies in the US and others, and I think a little bit of that perception change has definitely happened. But there is a lot more we can do, I think, and especially on the funding front.
Say a little more about that. What do you mean?
So I think, I'll give an example. Like, I remember meeting some investors in the Silicon Valley or Cambridge or other places, and they'd say, we love what you do, but we don't go beyond our, we don't look beyond 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers because we want to be able to be part of that company's growth. So I think for a lot of investors, for a lot of startups, I think having a big and a well-developed ecosystem of investors would be very necessary, because you have good quality startups, but in order for them to really grow, I think also need a good investor ecosystem, which I think while it has grown from what it was in 2000, I think we are still not there.
Right.
Compared to some of the other
Right.
ecosystems, even in Bangalore.
I fully agree with you. Sudhir, you just raised around. What was that like for you? Did Hyderabad factor into that at all?
Very interestingly, I completely echo with what Anu is saying. I'm like, we need a lot more ecosystem around investors and funding. That side of the ecosystem has to be built. And all of my fundraising has happened from Silicon Valley, because probably that's where I bring my network, and definitely the rest of them are from Bangalore. So I wish that is probably by the next anniversary or something, we should have more investors out of Hyderabad. I heard Satish Andhra is going to be here. A very few investors like India Partners are all in Hyderabad.
Srikanth is also there in the front row.
Is also here. There you go. Yeah. So yeah,
they're actually the oldest VC in the city as well, by the way.
So we would like to see more in Hyderabad, and at least like any global fund, when they wanted to come to India, they start an office in Bangalore. They should start something in Hyderabad, or at least they should think of Hyderabad as also one of the office when a global fund is walking into India. That's
Are there how much have either of you leveraged the Hyderabad ecosystem? We talk about the ecosystem, and sometimes it can become an echo chamber inside the ecosystem that we all think we're doing a great job. You two have both been part of it. Have you actually leveraged the ecosystem at all?
Honestly, I'm like, I was at a SaaStr conference in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, and I met a few founders who were from Hyderabad. I met them in San Francisco. So I think there is definitely a good bunch of people doing a lot of networking here, but we also need a lot more people to come together and kind of increase the networking is what I would say. And we are trying our best to kind of see how we can pull in the people and how we can engage into the ecosystem ourselves. But we also see that there's a lot more to be done.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think there are some, I feel, for instance, there is the THE, the Hyderabad Entrepreneurs Group, and I think that has been a fantastic group for getting a lot of people together. There has also been, I think I've been part of some of the other activities that happen around T-Hub. So I think definitely that networking is the starting point for building trust as well. And trust is an essential element whether you're looking at building a D2C company, whether you're building a B2B company. So I think definitely that part has definitely happened. I think we have created a lot of those bonds, but I think we need a little bit more Fevicol or whatever you want to call it.
The idea behind T-Hub was to act as kind of the glue between the ecosystem. And a lot of the events that are done, a lot of the programs that are done are about bringing people together. But I think, one thing I must say is that it is on each of us. Look, we're all part of the ecosystem. For everybody sitting in this room, you have a role to play. You can't sit there and expect the government to do stuff for you. You can't expect T-Hub to do everything for you. It's on you. So there are lots of opportunities and things you can leverage, but you have to know what's going on and do that amount of work. Having said that, yes, I believe there's a lot more that can be done. I believe that we need different types of activities and networks, for example, for different stages. There's a lot going on at the idea and seed stage. There's not so much happening at the later stages of funding, and I think that's something that MSR and team are looking into at the moment, but we definitely need to increase that. But one question I have for both of you is, it's a request and a question. What is it that you can do to help make this ecosystem stronger? And what else do you think we could potentially create?
So I feel that, one, we are entering into a very different times in our life, right? I mean, from a macro perspective, we are entering into where, funding might become difficult. We are entering into somewhere where, we have to help each other if you want to really succeed. And one of the things that I feel that, because I'm a second time around founder, I think which I did not get as advice was that maybe there is a time when you can leverage and be able to find ways to actually grow your business either through a merger, through an acquisition, or it could be something where you are leveraging off somebody else's business, whether it's for distribution, whether it's for something else. So it's not necessary that you are looking at only capital to be that force to drive your business. So I think that's one thing that maybe we should all talk about a little bit more, saying that if we have more successes, whether it is in terms of creating companies that have done it before, maybe it is not in the same range of value that people think it is, but we still build those. We still build that 1 or 2 rounds of levels of companies. I think that founders can come back to be able to build the second round and the third round of companies. And I think that will build better ecosystems, because they will then be able to, when you build that experience, you'll be able to help other founders as well. So I think that is one area where we can work.
Definitely, so many different ways. We all could pay it forward. There are other people who helped us to get to where we are today. One of the things what I started recently is when we talked to somebody in Bangalore as an investor, we said, hey, can you come here? We can have a chat. I say, why don't you make a trip to Hyderabad? We will invite more founders, and you get to meet more founders in Hyderabad. Right, and I was successful with once now, and I'll try to do more of these. I think we all should do our effort to kind of bring more of the limelight to all the amazing entrepreneurs here. That is one thing. And when it comes to how I can help, right, I think I always believe in there is a lot of general gyan that out there, and I don't believe in that. And there is a lot of specific questions that somebody has as a founder. When I was doing an M&A, I had a different question and a different people I need to interact to. When I'm raising my pre-seed round, I have a different question and somebody else I have to talk to, right? So I think the fundamental thing is about finding who is the right person where you want to be next immediately, right? Talking about something, the context is something that is very missing, and I wanted to keep it very, very relevant. Anybody who's trying to be in the SaaS space, I'm happy to help with any other ways I can. I don't want to get into more B2B, and that is where I am today, raising funds. I'm building something or networking in the US, building advisors. How do you build your engineering leadership? How do you do M&As? Again, all of those things I'm happy to help, but to keep it very narrow, something around B2B SaaS and fundraising, and maybe I am also learning GTM for a B2B. I would love to share and learn from people who have been there, done that.
You actually mentioned an organization, right, that does events, SaaSBoomi.
Yes.
Is that something we can bring back to Hyderabad? MSR, are we even in touch with the SaaSBoomi guys?
Yeah, luckily I'm I'm part of a Together Fund, and Avinash is a very close buddy of mine who's the founder of one of the founder of SAS Bhumi. Last time we had around 100 plus people for the SAS Bhumi event in Hyderabad when Tarun was here. But very happy to kind of enable that again.
And what I think was really cool about the SAS Bhumi, the event and the network, is again, it's founders helping founders, and it's very deep. It's not just surface level, right?
It is one is founders for helping founders. The second one is the relevance of all the people around that, right? It's a SaaS Bhumi, so it's like a lot of them are SaaS. Like I was telling, the relevance matters a lot when you're networking and who you're talking to, correct? So the SaaS Bhumi was successful in one way because everybody had a similar challenges. Somebody who went to Series A had a playbook on how to go to Series A. Somebody who cracked the US market or Southeast Asia market, they had a playbook that they could share it with somebody who wants to enter a new market. So that becomes a very relevant and very tactical advice that somebody could share.
Yeah, and I think on that same note, so SAS Bhumi is SaaS focused. Having other industry specific, vertical specific, and domain specific groups could help a lot. Anu, I just want to take it back to a question, something you mentioned in passing, right? M&A. So one of the things that's changed over the last 7 years is that there is more maturity in the market. Exits are happening, but it's not all the glamorous, high growth, really large exits happening. A lot of it is acqui-hires. Companies are facing struggles to raise that fund. I know that you've been through some of those conversations. Maybe you could address a little bit about the M&A conversation and how to even think about that.
Sure. So I think what has really changed, at least the last 20 years, is earlier you did not find founders never wanted to sell, right? I mean, it was just that was the truth. I think today that thing has changed considerably with founders starting to own lesser of their companies, and that's in one way is a good way of actually getting to that conversation about mergers and acquisitions. And I think that maybe it is not such a especially if you are 25, 26, 30 years old, I mean, this is not the end of life, right? I mean, neither at 50. But I think what you have to think about is that when you look at creating value for your company, right? You have something that is, you've seen other people having a lot of value that has been created because of the numbers you see in the newspaper, but you're struggling to find maybe, the right, way to grow your business. I think it might not be such a bad idea to say that what is it that I prioritize as a founder? Is it being able to find a bigger home for my idea? Is it to be able to find employment for my this thing? Is it to be able to find the distribution? So I think it's important to understand what you want to take your company to, and whether it is part of this, what you're building right now, or whether it is part of a different entity. I think as long as your objectives are met, are you willing to do that? And are you willing to do that at, when you look at, what value you might get out of it? You have to look at value and not valuation, because sometimes in the quest of valuation, you might start to lose value. So I think that's something that every founder needs to rethink and think about, because this is not going to be the end of life. This is going to be, where you start off. When you've created real value for your company, there will be another round where you can always get to be able to build a new company, build a version 2, build a version 3, and so on.
Yeah, and one of the things I do see is that, we all know in this room that startups are hard. A lot of them will fail. A lot of you probably may fail also. And you don't really want to just let go. And so you have to entertain some of those conversations.
Yes, and I can tell you that in my first startup, I refused to even entertain that idea. And that's why I'm saying this, because I felt that, you have a certain perception of where your company is, but I think one needs to get to realistic expectations of what you can get as well.
You touched a very important point, Anu, here. Going through multiple M&As, I'll tell you a very small story. When we were doing acquisition as part of my first startup in the Valley, we went, anytime a company is doing acquisitions, they'll probably look at 2 or 3 companies, at least sometimes in the same space. Should we acquire the first player or second player? And then we talked to both first player and second player didn't want to kind of get acquired. and we started consolidating the space in some way. And sixth acquisition was the second player. Instead of getting a $200 million deal, they ended up with a $40 million deal because the whole consolidation happened. Right. As a founder, I know it feels like very much so attached to the problem in the company. I think it's very important as a founder. It's because all the dreams are about your exit. It's not always about IPO or public, correct? And selling the company is not a bad thing. I'm like I wouldn't look at it that way at all. And just like understanding the macro situation, I'm like Figma is getting acquired. I'm like Slack can get acquired. Anybody can get acquired. Anybody, they're always good. And if it can create a good outcome for the founders and the people involved. That's the right choice. Should not be looked at as a negative thing, is what I would say.
Yeah. So we only have 5 minutes left, and we've been asked to wrap up a little early also. So one of the... do we have time for Q&A? 5 minutes? Does anyone have any questions for us? I saw a hand go straight away, that's why.
Yeah, I'm Sujit Kanaganti. My company is Aspecto Technology. It's in deep tech, AI, ML. It's based out of Hyderabad. My previous company is based out of Valley, San Diego. It's a remote assistive technology. We had an exit in 2020. But my third startup here is in Hyderabad. So the question goes to you guys is, from VC point of view, back in the West, right? My experience is only with the West and in the West. Now, for a company which is incorporated in India, do we really need to be a Delaware C Corp? Or what are the, what are the intricacies of being there, not being here? So I think it's a direct question. I'm not sure how much time you have, but that's it.
I'll give a very quick answer. See, the paperwork and where you represent, you can have a company here and you have a company registered in the US. I don't think that matters a lot. It's more about how can you make it more easy for the investors. It's very important because most of the funds are also based out of Singapore or Mauritius or US, and it makes the whole process a lot easier. So if that answers your question. You can be running your operations out of India. That's what building India for global whole mantra is about. The same thing now. You build your operations here, have your marketing or sales people there in the US. And even if you don't have, market is not your US, but market is still in India. Just to make it easier for the VCs and for your future rounds as you grow, it's very important to have some C Corp in Delaware or something. Happy to help more there.
So maybe we can just wrap up. I don't think we have time for another question. Any advice for the people in the room? I know it's a very general question, but if you can add something to that.
Don't take advice. No, I'm just kidding. But I think, all of us who are founders, we are optimistic by normal nature. And also, when you analyze DNA, we find that we are resilient. So there are going to be many opportunities. I think you need to make sure that you start thinking about creating true value and following your passion rather than trying to just do what the next person is doing to create valuation.
What I was saying, when you're in networking, the only advice I would say is do not ask questions like, can I do fundraising now? Should I hire people in the US? Do not ask such kind of questions. Rather ask, what should I be thinking if I wanted to, if I want to consider fundraising, yes or no? Those are the kind of questions that will give you a very lot of texture and context, because the opposite person will not have context in a hallway conversation. And you should not take that as a serious message, even if that's some super successful person who went public, because they do not have the context, right? So it's important to ask the right questions so that you get a right advice. So that's the only thing I would say.
So with that, I just want to wrap up. We definitely think there's a long way to go for the ecosystem, but I do want to celebrate the fact that we've come a heck of a long way in the last 7 years. Most of you who've been around since then, I think, can testify to the fact that Hyderabad is now on the map in ways that it never was before. So let's celebrate, let's keep going, and we're looking forward to lots of success coming out of the people sitting in this room today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anu Acharya, Mr. Sudhir Vandaru, and Mr. Srinivas Kolipara. It was an insightful session for all of us, and it has given us food for thought. I request our esteemed guest to please be on the stage, and I also request Mr. Paneer Selvam, CIO T-Hub, to please give away token of appreciation to our guests.
Twice in a row. This is the inauguration.
Thank you so much, Mr. Srinivas Kolipara, our mastermind and the founder himself. It's your never give up attitude that makes you strive and achieve the vision that you have paved. I hope you all remember the 6M2P framework of T-Hub. Now let's jump right into one of our M's, which stands for motivation. To give us a better understanding on the same, I invite Mr. Vikram Vuppala, founder and CEO, NephroPlus. He is revolutionizing healthcare industry by reshaping dialysis chain in India by setting up 250 plus dialysis centers across 150 plus cities in 4 countries to give T-Hub talk on the road to success.
Thank you, Anna. Audible? So when MSR asked me to give this talk, motivational road to success, I was not sure whether I was appropriate candidate because we are still on the path to success. But really glad to be part of this Foundation Day event. And I think reflecting on the previous discussion, when we started 12.5 years back, there was no startup ecosystem in Hyderabad or pretty much in India, right? But one thing I keep telling to everybody is that entrepreneurship success is not about the averages. It's not about whether the city has a great ecosystem, whether there are enough VCs in the city, whether there are enough mentors. Entrepreneurs have to plow through challenges, right? So I think the ecosystem has come a long way. When we started, I think we did 2 rounds of angel funding, and you wouldn't believe we diluted 50% of the company in the first 2 rounds of angel funding. So nobody to advise, nobody, but we got multiple venture capital rounds and we corrected it. But taking a step back, just to introduce myself, name is Vikram Vuppala. I'm the founder and CEO of NephroPlus. We are India's largest dialysis network. We run 305 centers now across 185 cities, 4 countries. And in India, we are present in 175 cities, 25 states. We dominate the dialysis market in India. The second largest player is 1/4 of our size. So clearly the leader. But it took a long time to get here. And I think one of the things that I keep telling people is to create any fantastic long-term sustainable company, it takes a minimum of 10 years. Anything less than 10 years, it's very, very difficult to create a rock star company, right? And I think one of the things that I see in the 20s, early 20s, mid 20s startup founders is the urge to do things very, very quickly. While it's great to be very aggressive and so on, but in terms of playing the game of valuation, people get carried away. People just raise money at very, very high valuation, and that can get back and harm the company. So it's very important to be resilient. I think Anu mentioned the word resilience. Startup founders are resilient by design, but I think the passion to stay in the long game is very, very important to build a truly remarkable company. Just a quick background about myself. I studied at IIT Kharagpur and then went to the US, did masters, worked at a couple of firms, including McKinsey and Abbott. And then in 2010, I moved back to India. My thesis was we can create a healthcare company in the diabetes and hypertension ecosystem. I had 4 ideas in this space. And fortunately, I met my co-founder Kamal, who happens to be from Hyderabad as well, through his blog. He is himself on dialysis for the last 25 years. And when I was researching on this space, I found him, reached out to him. We had a conversation going. And when I moved back to India, I met him the very next day. So he's still is really, really an amazing co-founder. Even though he's 46 years and 25 years on dialysis, he's still going very strong. I think when I saw Kamal, the co-founder, I realized if a customer can be my co-founder, then we will understand the customer better than anybody else in the world. That's the unique edge that I felt would be really powerful. And that's how, while the other three ideas were more financially lucrative, they were in the online medication space, there was a distribution firm, there was community clinics, and so on. But I was really intrigued by this dialysis network. So I put in money, did a couple of angel rounds. My colleagues from McKinsey and my classmates from Booth and IIT Kharagpur, they invested. We did 2 rounds of angel funding, and then it just got started. We started in Hyderabad and then Bangalore, Chennai. Then we made a big corporate tie-up with Max Hospitals in North India. You might have heard of Max Hospitals. So that was the big inflection point for us, where we could convince a large corporate hospital to outsource their entire dialysis value chain to us. So that started the momentum. At that time, Bessemer Venture Partners, Silicon Valley based, but they have an office in Bangalore. They were very intrigued with what we were doing. They invested $4.25 million 11 years ago in NephroPlus. And their thesis was that India needs a dialysis network. They talked to all the fledgling startups and decided to invest in us. And that's when the North India expansion started, West India expansion started. And then IFC, which is the World Bank venture arm, they invested about $10 million. And then after a few years, we did Series C. Another 2 years, we did Series D. Last December, we did Series E. So overall, all in all, we could raise about $100 million, spread over 5 rounds of private equity and 2 rounds of angel funding. And you would be surprised that Bessemer Venture Partners, who invested 11 years ago, they're still a shareholder in NephroPlus. IFC, 9.5 years, still a shareholder in NephroPlus. We were lucky to get really good venture capital, private equity investors in us. So I think healthcare delivery, dialysis network being a brick and mortar business, it's not a capex light business. So we had to raise money every couple of years to fund our expansion plans. And being a first generation entrepreneur, it was always a tricky point. Every 2 years, you're diluting 15, 20, 25% of the company. But when I went to Booth, one of my professors, Steve Kaplan, finance professor, he said, entrepreneurs should not worry so much about dilution. 100% of $1 million is million, 10% of $1 billion is 100 million, right? So many founders I see are very obsessed with the dilution. Dilution does not matter. It's just a midpoint of the journey, right? And I think we have been fortunate to just keep on raising every couple of years. We never struggled with raising money. We had a lot of incoming investor interest. I think that served us well to not worry too much about dilution. Of course, everyone would like to have more equity stake in their own startups, but we should not worry too much about dilution. And I think overall the ecosystem has been quite supportive. In the early days, TiE Hyderabad, I was part of the TiE Hyderabad. I was on the board of TiE Hyderabad. That ecosystem was helpful. T-Hub, when it started, I participated in few events. Now I'm participating in few events. There's a lot of giving back that a lot of founders need to do, but the ecosystem at that time 10 years back was miserable. It's fairly decent right now. So for all of you who are looking at starting companies or have already started companies, I think this is a great time when you have so many mentors to speak to, seasoned founders, to speak to and get advice, T-Hub ecosystem to take advantage of. I think you're in great shape. There were three specific themes I wanted to talk about to not keep it very generic but very specific. One is I want to talk about the difference between a sprinter founder and a marathoner founder. These two are very different animals. Sprinter founder, marathoner founder. If you think about it, the sprinter founder is extremely flamboyant. He's in the news, he or she is in the news almost every other week, right? Sprinter founder is much more focused on GMV than profitability, right? Sprinter founder cannot retain leadership team for a long time. There's a lot of churn in the leadership team. People will come, people will go, but the founders continue to do their gig. Sprinter founders always look at valuation or always looking at exit. How do I sell the company? Always in that game, right? Compared to that, a marathoner founder is usually under the radar, understated, lot of sharing of the credit with the team. You don't see them too much in the limelight. Marathoner founders are always focused on taking profitable projects. It's very easy to burn 2 rupees to get 1 rupee revenue. Marathoner founders don't do that. They're always focused on profitability at all times, regardless of the wave or the fads that are happening in the ecosystem. Marathoner founders always create leaders in their own startups, and they encourage those leaders to create new startups from that stable. So that's a unique distinguishing feature, and they reward the leadership team very generously. Sprinter founders hoard all the equity. Marathoner founders generously distribute equity in terms of ESOPs. The marathoner founders are focused on value creation and long-term sustainability. So these two are very, very different things. If I think about a marathoner founder, like somebody, if you look at Zerodha as a company, that seems like a fantastic long-term marathoner founder, right? If you look at White Hat Junior, some of these very hopeless startups, those are sprinter founders, right? I think each of you should be very clear. Am I a sprinter founder? There's inherently nothing bad with being a sprinter founder, but you should assess yourself. What are your ethical boundaries? What are your moral boundaries? What are your value system? Decide whether you are a sprinter founder or a marathoner founder, and do consistent actions according to what you decide, who you are, right? That was one theme that I wanted to mention. The second theme I wanted to mention is lot of fundraising discussion, right, all the time, and I've seen so many mistakes happen during fundraising exercises. The first big mistake is too much focus on the valuation. I've personally gone through an episode where I just stepped the foot of the pedal, and I got in an investor, and the next 2 years were miserable for us. You wouldn't believe how distracting it is to get a bad investor into your company, right? So don't focus obsessively on valuation. 10, 20, 25% does not matter. If you can get a good VC with whom there is good chemistry and there is alignment on the vision, nothing like it. Valuation is very, very temporary metric. It can go up, it can go down. Now you are seeing the newspapers, funding winter is coming, the down rounds are happening, layoffs are happening. Valuation is very, very temporary metric. It does not matter. So focusing on the chemistry with the incoming investors, making good 3-4 reference check calls with the portfolio companies of these investors is extremely important. That's mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 is, again, going back to the worry about dilution. Founders do not raise enough money thinking that, hey, I'm getting diluted more. Empirical evidence states that founders should always raise little bit more capital than they need based on their business models. So don't worry about that extra 0.5% dilution, it will never break the bank. It does not matter. Your lifestyle will not change if you have 0.25% more equity in your startup. So always raise a little bit more than you need. And another funny thing that I realized, which many founders who have raised money will also tell you, is when you're looking for money, you won't get money. When you're not looking for money and you're doing well, a lot of people keep coming and offering money, right? So even if your plan does not require you to raise money at that specific point, if there is a lot of people knocking the doors, it's not a bad idea to raise a little bit of money to create your war chest for your M&A activities, for your new initiatives, and so on. So it's very surprising. When you want, even for debt, it's the same rule. When you ask for debt, nobody gives you debt. When you're running fine, all the banks will start offering you loans, right? So that's a funny part of finance. The third mistake founders in startups do is they depend too much on bankers for fundraising. Bankers, I can tell you, are highly overrated. There are specific scenarios where they may be helpful in terms of synchronizing the interest from multiple investors, or if you are a founder who do not have any network to tap into to meet the investors, or you don't have good relationships, bankers could be useful. But if you are a founder who has good connect with the investors already and you have a good finance head, you would rather do it yourself. We have done 3 rounds without a banker and we loved it. Fourth avoidable mistake during fundraising, always as a founder, create liquidity options for your leadership team. A lot of times what happens is ESOPs, when you give ESOPs to your leadership team, but you don't create any liquidity opportunity for them, then it all becomes theoretical. It's all on paper. From Series C onwards, we at Nephroplus, we created liquidity option. Whoever could sell, whoever wanted to sell, they could sell up to 50% of their 60% of their vested ESOPs. So creating that liquidity options, I think, will create a lot of satisfaction among your leadership team. And always negotiate very good ESOP quantum from the investors who are coming in, or from the board of directors, if you already have existing investors. So those were the 4 avoidable mistakes during fundraising. The third theme I wanted to briefly mention a few minutes is there is a big difference between a founder risk and a venture capital portfolio risk. What do I mean by that? VCs usually, Shrikant is here, I think. Oh, he stepped outside. Okay. So VCs usually have, any VC that you talk to have a portfolio of about 10 to 15 firms, right? Founder has one firm. There's no portfolio spread for the founder. Now VCs, their business model, nothing bad about the business model, is VCs have these general partners who are the people who are operating the fund. They raise money from limited partners, right? The endowment funds, the banks, the pension funds and so on, mutual funds and so on, high net worth family offices. They raise money from LPs and they deploy the money in portfolio companies, right? That's the model. There is a usual model of 2% management fee and 20% carry. Now VCs, all VCs in the world, their model is they would want to induce steroids for each of their portfolio company in which they see promise. About majority of the portfolio companies will die. All the VCs companies in the world, majority of the portfolio startups will die, which is fine for them, because VC model is geared upon 1 or 2 multi-baggers of the funds. What do I mean by that? There will be 1 or 2 companies. For $100 million fund, they will deliver $100, $200 million return. That's the venture capital model, right? There's a big difference between a VC portfolio risk, where the grow at any cost injections, steroid injections are given to all the portfolio companies. Then you are growing, you're growing, investing in marketing, you're getting Amitabh Bachchan to flash your product, Shah Rukh Khan to give your edtech promotion, right? All these things. That's like spending a lot of marketing dollars, right? And you want growth at any cost. That's a VC portfolio risk. They are conscious that majority of their startups will die. Founder has only one company. If the founder wants to generate, let's say, 15% CAGR growth, 15% CAGR growth for 10 plus years, can you believe how valuable that company will be? 10 years compounding. People in this world don't appreciate the power of compounding, right? 15 to 20% growth for 10 years, you will be a large company. But venture capital firms have a 4-5 year window horizon. They want quick 3-4 year exits, right? So I think you need to understand, depending on whether you are a sprinter founder or a marathoner founder, you need to understand this VC portfolio risk versus founder risk and play the game accordingly. Nothing bad in either one of them, but you need to consciously take care of that. I've been very conscious at Nephroplus to not get carried away with growth at any cost, do non-profitable acquisitions, do risky acquisitions for the short-term gains. We have done two acquisitions, 2 large acquisitions and many small acquisitions, but always whether this will add value to the company, never under investors or board members' pressure, right? That's the third theme, VC portfolio risk versus a founder risk. I can go on and on for a long time, but mindful of the time, would love to answer any questions, because I think everyone will have a different context around it and want to be helpful.
After this session, I think it's time for us to focus and find our roads, not just on Google Maps, but also our roads to success. Thank you, Mr. Vikram. I request M. Srinivas Rao sir to please give away a token of appreciation. Next up, we have Mr. Gaurav Mangala, CEO and co-founder of Picker, and Mr. Jeevraj Singh, founder of Indian Silicon Valley Capital. He's building India's first startup podcast to give us a fireside chat on pivoting, handling challenging times, to give us a better understanding on the next M, which stands for methodologies in our 6M 2P framework.
Glad to be doing this. Thank you so much for the opportunity and glad to be hosting Gaurav. Before I get started, I must acknowledge that I'm from Calcutta and I've spent the last 3 years as a virtual citizen of sorts. But the last 2 days I've been at T-Hub at campus and I have enjoyed every bit of it. And I can't express how excited I am for Hyderabad's ecosystem, because I think there's such a long way to go and it has a very, very strong foundation to begin with. Before we go ahead, I want to introduce our guest and the man in front of me. Gaurav is one of the most prolific founders I have had the opportunity to know and sit across. I've hosted him on the show once and I've also known him for the better part of the last 2 quarters. He's one of the most straightforward, candid founders and execution first. To give you a more elaborate background very, very quickly in 30 seconds, he's a serial entrepreneur, a graduate of IIT Guwahati. He built a company in HR tech before building Picker, which is one of the largest logistics company in the country and was recently acquired for $200 million by Shiprocket. Can we have a huge round of applause for Gaurav joining us today?
Yeah, thanks everyone. Glad to be here. First time in Hyderabad, and I'm really glad, how could I missed the place such as Hyderabad. And like just to start, lot of things, already Vikram sir, like hats off literally. I am certain validations of, certain points you mentioned regarding, the VC ecosystem and the founder ecosystem have been, I'll share some experiences, to validate what all, like as a second validation to his point. Just to get started, myself Gaurav, I'm a 2013 graduate from IIT Guwahati in maths and computing, like from a very normal background, never seen a flashy life, just landed into a 8 lakh per annum kind of a job from IIT also at that point of time in 2013, kind of acqui-hiring what, I considered as a, something to fast track your salary, get acquired, do a startup, learn 360-degree things and get acquired and make your salary 3x. This is one thing that, I had a learning myself on the acquiring piece. And then, once you are able to visualize a company, scale it, then always, think about liquidity. Don't fall for traps of, something, flashy things going around you or in the media. And so, first startup, I started with almost a 30,000 saving. Then family income was also not that good. So my family didn't know that I was not doing a job. I was running a startup. And second startup was also like, just first startup failed and we guys joined a company on 3x salary, and then in like another 2-3 months realized this company is not meant for us. Again, we all connected. We all, in general, roped our third founder who just completed his MBA from ISB, had a 25 lakh loan. So we roped in him as well. And within 48 hours, he took a flight from, Chennai and came back to, Delhi. And it was a good moment. We started Picker, lots of ups and downs. And recently, the acquisition piece also I'll cover. It was not just about money. There were a lot of other things that, I would like people, to think about when they will come across such situations. And really glad to be here. Too young, I've seen like literally very honored to be here in this place. Thanks everyone.
That's lovely. I think that covers most of the introduction. What's very exciting is that there has been success at the end of it, but it was never a very, very linear, successful journey, right? It had a lot of ups and downs, and that's what we want to cover in the next couple of minutes. Gaurav, if you were to give us a background of, how you had to pivot from an owned fleet logistics model to a software company, and how you did not get the VC dollars and you survived for 4 years on cash flow. If you can maybe take us through those days, I think that'll be very helpful for the audience, and then we'll come to the acquisition bit.
Yeah, so I think one point which Vikram covered was don't chase valuations. Valuation should be a function of business and, the team, including the founding team. So there was a point that, we were running last mile delivery. We were almost 32nd startup in the last mile delivery. Not to be proud of literally, but there were, every other startup was getting funded. We thought that, we will not solve for, 1 hour, 2 hour delivery. We'll solve for a same day, next day delivery kind of a thing. But then also, the kind of customers we chased, the kind of model, like without knowing that, what kind of customers we will get. And then the business model, the kind of customers like Snapdeal and all came on, like super enterprise customers came up, and we got burned out. So for us, it was a kind of a, you can say, a majburi that, we had to shift towards reducing cost. That we can't incur a cost of 32 rupees and get 24 rupees in revenue. So that was one thing. Other thing was that, we really liked the space, like all three of us had chosen this time. We wanted that, e-commerce is something which, gets revolutionized. And there is a lot of scope beyond just, Flipkart and Amazon. So those were the beliefs in 2015-16 when there was no D2C, like almost, there was nothing like for D2C, but we felt that, there will be a time when, we need to be in this ecosystem. We can't give up today. And so we decided, let's try different stuff. Let's reduce pickup from our delivery boys and give it to Kirana stores. They should do pickups for you. Don't rent warehouses. Don't own the liability of warehouses. There are a lot of, warehouse infrastructure in India. Utilize that, partner with that. And for last mile, don't go with startups who are not able to figure out unit economics. Go with larger companies who are doing better last mile. Then, figuring out how actually e-commerce works, where, like knowing your customer into depth, like going into deep, like what these days everybody says that, MS Dhoni has taught everyone to go deep into the game. So that's actually reality here as well, that, you have to understand your customer better. You have to understand your product better. And then align a team also, when you are grinding as a founder, like you don't have a portfolio, you have a single company. as like echoing the words of Vikram. So the team also, but team has multiple, see, the outside factors around a founder is very different as compared to a team member. He will be very much influenced by what's happening around him. As a founder, this is the thing that differentiates you, that you're not that much influenced by what's happening around you. So sticking with the team, we still have almost everyone who was with us, in 7 years back. The people we have lost, we ourselves bought those people out, that, they wanted to move out to pursue something, and we in fact increased our shareholding in the company when there was nothing happening. We were in no man's land. So those were the key factors around it. And apart from that, main pivoting happened is like it was a three-way pivot. None of the pivot got VC money. And we realized that, let's see that, is this the company we want to run for 10-15 years? We were not able to get that answer in first 4 years. That was the actual main thing. It was like, the day we got that answer, that, then we never looked back and we went super aggressive, like literally raised 3 kinds of rounds, and at all 3 point of time, never went outbound. All the term sheets were inbound. It was purely on revenue. It was not at all on valuation, and we didn't got flashy valuation. In fact, the number one player was getting 6x, 7x of revenue. We got 2.5 or 3 of X of revenue, but ours were much more realistic numbers at that point of time. And, valuation should not be a function of whether, there is a bear market or a bull market. It has to be a function of, the team and the business model and revenue specifically. So a lot of people think, how I increase my valuation? Think about, how do you increase your business? Just stick to that. Basic valuations is something that will come as an output of it.
Absolutely, those are great lessons and very, very candid, as I mentioned. That's great, Gaurav, to know. But the other side of this is you went from going for a survival 1 crore angel round to a 1,500 crore exit, right? Talk to us about that phase. I mean, from survival to success, what did that look like and how did you navigate those times? We were also chatting about, the point that you mentioned around team. How did you align them, focus on execution, and how did those things play out to the eventual point of the exit? You had some nuances you wanted to share. Why don't you talk to us about that?
So, to be very candid here, like generally, like-minded peoples want to work with like-minded peoples. So we always hired good folks from, as all the founding team was from tier 1 colleges. That was not something that is required all the time, but we were in that situation. So we hired from those, and like personally, we sold this acqui-hire stuff only, that, the worst case for you in life is getting acqui-hire and multiplying your salary. This was one mantra which, every candidate bought who joined Picker. In those days when, we started with almost nothing, we raised a first round of 1.25 crore, diluting 22% of the company. Then a survival round of 1 crore, diluting another 14% of the company. So it was almost a 33-34%, relative dilution that we had, after those 2 rounds in 2016, then no capital till 2020 December. And in 2000, like, I'll give you numbers also, like first round happened on $1 million valuation. Second round happened on $1.5 million valuation. And after 4 years, after figuring out all those things, the series A round happened at somewhere around $11 million valuation. B in another 3 months happened at around $44 million valuation. C in another 4 months happened at around $180 million valuation. So this was like, after figuring out what you can scale, how you can scale, are you the right person to scale? So that was one thing. And team also goes by, founders only. So, the good people you want to retain will always be inspired by founders. If you're not able to inspire those good people, you will lose those people. Personally, have lost also, have gained also, some have retained. But majority of the people we wanted to retain are retained with us even till now. And a lot of rejoinings happened. Like, people where there were no man's land kind of phases that, we were in nowhere and we were also not retaining at those points. And those people again joined us when we figured out that, how to scale and what to scale. So these were the important things around it.
Got it. Fair enough. Towards the end, right, you were going to raise another round, but this happened as a coincidence, right? Talk to us about what was the thought process around getting acquired at a time where everything was falling in your hands and growth was in your favor. Everything was going the way it should have been. But you still decided to sell. What was the thought process like? What were the decisions, variables that you considered at that point, and how did it play out?
See, there were two main things. One is, on the team and the founder side, there has been, it has been almost a 7.5, 8 year kind of a grind that, the time value of money, like in next 5 years, like, will you make more money by running the business or will you make more money by exiting and investing it? So this was one kind of a judgment. The other judgment was the ecosystem play. See, the market in logistics is very competitive. All the courier companies, everyone, is struggling, for growth. And a lot of people, they want to replicate wherever everyone else is getting success. And lot of consolidation was also expected. And customers were eventually, getting a way lower price than the actual price in the market. See, diesel petrol cost is always on a hike, right? But how then, a delivery cost is always on a roll down. How can this math be, a logical thing? Apart from that, we both Picker and Shiprocket raised almost a $185 million round. We closed almost a $60 million kind of a round. Then, we would be burning this $250 million just to go to the same customers. And we were the exact products. It's just that, enterprise customers used to love us more and non-enterprise customers, small scale, long tail, mid-size customers used to love Shiprocket more. So even after the acquisition that we are now a standalone product doing similar things, we are still growing 10% month on month. So there is no reduction in the growth, like almost 6 months into the acquisition thing also. So this just gives a glimpse that, our business was also like a scalable business. Like we built something very niche for enterprises and they built something for that. So these were the two things that, as an ecosystem, will you make more money? Will you scale better? If Picker, to quantify it, the road for Picker from $200 million to a $2 billion, or versus Picker plus Shiprocket, a $1 billion to a $5.5 or $6 billion kind of a road. So these were the calls that, eventually influenced the decision. And like everybody said, don't raise money when it is not required. So whenever, like in last 2 years, we focused totally on growth and revenue numbers. Like I mentioned, the valuation numbers, our revenue number also went from, 1 crore to 30 crore a month in less than 19 months. And it was a real revenue. It was not, buying something or doing something, giving something. It was a pure, full-fledged money that we were able to, the value that we were able to generate from our customers. And our customers also grew. E-commerce, D2C brands were earlier less than 10% of the overall GMV. Now they are contributing around 20-22% of the GMV. And they are on a path to a 45-50% of the GMV in next 5 to 6 years. So this validates our product as well.
Awesome. No, that's wonderful. Unfortunately, we don't have as much time and we wanted to make this interactive, but Gaurav's going to stick around for a while, so feel free to address your questions to him in person. To bring this to a close, and this has been wonderful, at the risk of sounding repetitive perhaps, Gaurav, if you could maybe just talk to us about the fundamentals that got you through this journey of a 7-year roller coaster, at the end of which there was great success, and I'm sure there's much more to follow. But some of the fundamentals, like I'm a huge fan of the resilience that the team has been able to show, the profitability fundamentals that you had as a team, maybe some summarizing points for the audience. I think that would bring us to a great close.
See, one would be that, if you are starting something up, it's a marathon kind of a stuff. It is not something to, expedite so quickly. In early days, 0 to 1, decision making can be faster so that you don't realize your failure 3 years, 4 years down the line. But you have to stay ahead of the curve, what is happening around you, and mainly through, the business. Funding and all will follow if you are doing good in the business. Second is you have to have a vision for not just for a year or two. You have to have a vision for 4 to 5 years. And every team member has to be aligned with the vision. It should not be, that you want to do something and your team doesn't want to do the same thing. And third thing would be, always, go founder first approach or team founder plus team plus approach. Don't go VC plus approach in terms of decision making. VCs add a lot of value in, expediting your business, but sometimes, too much dependence on, the VC advice can be lethal as well. So like some of the VCs, will always bring in a lot of other folks outside the ecosystem. And as founders, you should always be, thinking of hiring good people, better people to run or scale your business at different points of time. There are points when you only need hustlers, but there are points when you need specialist people as well. And you have to be, cognizant of the fact that you have to trust those people. You just don't feel that, I am the founder and whatever I say is right. You have to, like 9 decisions out of 10 decisions have to be, taken by those guys if you are on the scaling front. You have to just give them proper confidence and, proper environment so that they can make better decisions. You can't just be a roadblock into those things. Apart from that, be confident and always be clear of what you are chasing. Don't just, start something that my father has a lot of money, I have nothing to lose, let me start something up. This should not be the reason of doing a startup. You should have something that, like something you want to chase, or don't fall in trap that every company will be a unicorn company. And if you're not building a unicorn company, you're losing your path. You are solving a problem. End of the day, valuation is not the eventual outcome of your startup. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. That was lovely. I think clarity of thought and the importance of people reiterated 7 times in that last answer alone. Can we have another huge round of applause for Gaurav? This is an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gaurav and Mr. Jeevraj, for such a wonderful session. I request Wing Commander Anish Anthony, CDO, Chief Delivery Officer T-Hub, to please give away a token of gratitude. The journey of a diversified, dynamic, experienced panelist that we're going to witness now is not just any common journey. The knowledge that they're going to impart on us will be vital to shape us as entrepreneurs. Yes, I'm talking about the other M, money. Now let's proceed towards the panel discussion on journey from seed to Series A. I request Srinivas Kolipara sir to please introduce the moderator, Dr. Shrikant Sundarajan, and our other distinguished panelists.
So it's my honor to introduce the moderator for this next panel, a very exciting panel actually. So Shrikant has been a teacher, a mentor and investor in many, many startups. He's been a CXO at multiple large IT firms, including Persistent Systems, Cognizant, etc. He's currently general partner at Venture East. And he's been actually really instrumental in my journey also. So happy to introduce Dr. Shrikant Sundarajan.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And today the panel is kind of really interesting and deep. It comes from here because there's one very cool space tech company. There's a wonderful friend of mine who's actually been on this journey with me for 25 years. And both of us felt Hyderabad would be it. Satish Andhra, he's been an entrepreneur. He's actually been part of our Venture East team, and he's also got his own cool fund now, which is on the fund 2. They've done about 29 investments here, and 4 of them have exited, and quite a few of them are from Hyderabad. One good example is Darwinbox. So Satish, please. Then I want to introduce my good friend Pawan. Where's Pawan? Here. Okay. Right in front of my eyes. Okay. Sorry, I can't see that well. Okay. So Pawan's got a very cool company called Skyroot. Actually, they made the news about, I would say 2-3 months ago when they raised $51 million. Very few people actually have ventured into space tech. And these bunch of kids have done some phenomenal work at ISRO. And let's hope that they actually kind of change what India is about in terms of both space tech as well as communication tech, as well as maybe make launching a satellite very easy from anywhere, right? Because if you remember ISRO in the 1950s and 60s, the very first rocket launch was from a bullock cart. I don't know how many people remember that. So we don't need bullock carts anymore. We have Skyroot. Pawan. And then we have Sandeep. And Sandeep, actually, I met in 2017 in the IIIT Hyderabad demo day. At that time, he had a funky kind of triangular, pyramidical looking things which would sit on top of taxis and actually kind of do some live advertisements. And he had a display also, right? Inside the taxi saying that if you're going anywhere, you can actually buy something more. And it's all contextual advertising. And 2019, I saw the last one of those and I was hoping things would be good. It turned out that COVID was very bad because obviously everything went down. But this guy has actually built something out from nothing. I mean, they are immensely popular now. They are profitable. It's basically advertising and media still, but from home and connecting brands and basically media houses and advertisement. It all comes together, and they've done really well. And you're probably at about 2 crores profitability per month now, at least cash flow wise, which is phenomenal, despite COVID. Please. So the theme of this is going to be a little bit of interaction, and I think whenever people print something like this out, because I'm a prof also, I've been an exec, I've been an entrepreneur, and I'm an investor. So typically I don't use this brief, but because I'm getting old, I needed to at least remember names. Satish I could, okay, a couple of other people I may forget, but the most important thing is basically to kind of understand when you need to raise, why you need to raise, do you need to raise? Okay, I think the previous founder kind of mentioned that you should raise anyway, even if you don't. But I think that's okay in basically certain segments because you've already got momentum. That way you actually raise early and kind of basically have reserves to actually beat competition. Sometimes you don't have to do that. So we'll just go over some of this very informally. So rather than actually go round robin, I'm going to do some very random stuff. So Pawan, when did you think rockets would be you and you would be rockets?
Yeah, very good questions. In fact, I used to watch news of ISRO, and during college days, and I've always fascinated. How can something, a machine built by man, can go to space? So always fascinated me as an engineer. And luckily ISRO came to the campus, which in IIT is very rare, and the second time it has come that year, and so I didn't sit for any other company, so I just wanted to get into ISRO, and after joining ISRO, I think it became 100x. My interest on rockets and fascination, the infatuation actually turned into a real I would say obsession for rockets, and the journey 6 years at ISRO has been like 100x. Obsession for rockets has been built, actually working on phenomenal missions there. Yeah.
So Satish, I mean, we've been trying to build the investor ecosystem here. Now MSR is here. We're going to try it one more time. We've tried it with Srini in the early days. We attempted to try it with Ravi Narayan. Okay. I just say attempted. Okay. But we will try again in seriousness. So what do you think is missing still? What can happen? Because there are some cool companies, and you've done whole lot of that, right?
No, I think I've said this in the past, and I keep saying this, right? So you should not compare ecosystems. It's very difficult, how they evolve and how they grow. Since all of us are so proud of Pullal Gopichand here, we're all involved very closely. You go and ask and say, Prakash Padukone's academy has been there for 25 years or 30 years. Why hasn't it produced similar kind of champions that Gopi Academy has produced in less than 15 years? There's no real answer. It's very, very difficult. I do believe, that Hyderabad has fabulous, obviously, ingredients to create a successful ecosystem. And I think we're seeing the playbooks, right, come out. So entrepreneurs, I feel, just like sports persons, when you watch someone playing, you get inspired and you believe, and if they're practicing with you, you believe that you can also do it. And then you not only emulate their playbook, but probably you'll write a better playbook. You take it to the next level. And I've seen that happen, Saina versus Sindhu versus Srikanth, on and on and on. And it's very similar in entrepreneurship as well. I think with all the momentum that we have, if you really look at the ingredients, I think, we have the educational institutions, we have the R&D units here in multiple verticals. I think capital chases entrepreneurs. There's a myth kind of saying, oh my God, there's no capital in Hyderabad or whatever. I think capital is a commodity. Capital will chase wherever there's a good entrepreneur. So I have a very strong belief that we will get to the next level. But even till then, I think this is the best place to live in the country, right? So you can work anywhere, but live here. Yeah.
Go Hyderabad. So actually, I always actually was fascinated with what you were doing in 2017. And I was even more fascinated that you actually chose IIT Indore. When I went to campus there as a guest prof, there was one building with no roof. Okay, you remember that?
That was 1 year before we joined, but yeah.
All right. Okay. So, how was your life then, and what kind of got you going on this whole ad side of things?
So college was, at least to me, I wasn't that first bencher in college, right? So college to me was a lot of fun. I was involved in every activity possible. I was heading the training placement office. I was one of the lead organizers for a cult fest. I was also part of the basketball team. So I think except for attending classes and doing my computer science, I did everything in college.
So what about your own branding? Did you do a good job there?
I don't know. I'm very inactive on social media and LinkedIn, so not a good job.
So no surprise where you kind of went with your first startup, right?
Yeah. So first startup, we started out of college, failed very quickly, and joined Microsoft here for 3 years, out of which 1 year we were moonlighting. So not a very popular thing to do now, but yeah. And then we started Add-on-Mo, and advertising Hyderabad is not a good fit. Anyone looking to start advertising startups out of Hyderabad, we just don't have
I'm surprised that you say that, because in the old days, right, any new product that was launched, especially FMCG, it was actually launched from Hyderabad.
Correct.
Whether it's cigarettes, whether it's soft drinks, whatever. So what changed?
So Hyderabad has always been a great sandbox market. Even for us, if not for Hyderabad, we wouldn't have been able to launch our first product, which is screens on cars, right? No other government would be crazy enough to let us do that. So I think Hyderabad is still a great place from a sandbox point of view. It's just that the ecosystem for advertising, the agencies, and then all of that, they're headquartered elsewhere. So we kind of went with it, and we developed our leadership team in few of those other cities. So now we are kind of balanced.
So now let's come back to investments, right? Whenever you're selling a concept which is somewhat far out, maybe it's sandbox, I understand. What kind of, what was your experience like when you talked to some VCs, including me and Satish? I'm sure you talked to us also some point in time, right?
So none of the wise VCs invested in us. We had to find our own set of fools who believed in us, right? And we literally, the only reason we were able to raise funds at that point in time is because we were doing something so out of the box. Like, it kind of interested people. Like, oh, you're putting a screen on car, tell me more about it, right? So that's the only reason we raised funds. Every VC would be interested to listen to us, and they would also be wise enough to tell us, don't do this. It took us almost 3 years to realize probably there are better things to do within the same space once COVID hit. Also, we didn't have an option to do something else, and I think that's how we went about it.
So actually, a lot of people should take heart from this, because a lot of people say COVID comes, we get wiped out, there's going to be this investment winter showing up. But actually, it creates a lot of innovation, right? For example, if you look at Add-on-Mo now, all of that happened during COVID time, and the kind of momentum they've generated now is because of that. So could you shed some light on that?
So just a background for people who don't know us. So we were doing those cars, digital screens on cars, and obviously once COVID hit, cars were not going around. And the worst part is we raised our funds about 1.5 million just before COVID in the January. And during COVID, before COVID started, we placed massive orders to kind of do more of those screens on cars. And by the end of COVID, like around October of that year, we were left with our last $400,000 in the bank. And we were all on 30% payroll, trying to bring the burn down to 20 lakhs per month. And we just wanted to take a shot. Last $400,000, let's do whatever. So that also gave a sense of freedom, because we were going back to the drawing board, knowing our existing business is not going to work. We need to do something else. And that's where we did the existing inside building model, and everything worked out. I think from then we just, we still struggled to raise funds in 2021. It was difficult to convince investors that this is going to work, because we were very small, we were desperate for
Similar
funds.
people like us? Or
Yeah, 2021 was a tricky period. We know what we were doing was working. At the same time, we didn't have enough belief in the market because we were still very early.
So this is very critical. Once you get to the point where something is working, I think the first panel, both Anu and you talked about it, that is actually basically the eureka moment, because once you know that formula, you're able to articulate things better and you're able to show proof points, right? So it doesn't matter if I didn't like it, but Satish would have liked it for sure, right? Now, going back to you, Pawan, I mean, you also had a somewhat similar journey, right? From seed stage to Series A. And for you, it's also kind of slightly complicated because you do need real R&D engineers, okay, real expertise, okay, and you also need CapEx. So how did you actually make that leap? Because proof points are difficult, right? You can't just shove rockets every second day and say, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. So first thing is that we raised decent size rounds. To start off with, in fact, like we raised a 1.5 mil seed round in 2018, mid kind of a thing. So that was enough to complete the design, and also to show some good, decent prototypes to show that, we're capable of doing it, actually building rockets and launching them, right? So that's one good thing which happened, just decent sized rounds which help us get to the next stage. And in between, COVID happened, and 1-2 years, there was a bit of, different priorities for a lot of investors. And then so there was difficult time actually during that portion of to close our Series A, but then we raised the Series A. After showing it, by that time, one big event also happened. The government announced space reforms, So just imagine we raised the seed round before even the policy is there, before even everybody thought space and rockets of a government domain, no government is going to allow in India, right? So that was like a big barrier to beat during our seed round. But fortunately, we had a decent seed round at that point. And then during this COVID, what happened is that the government announced several reforms. If you remember, I think the finance ministers come and so many reforms across sectors, and space happened to be one of the sector. So the biggest barrier for our business model is just removed, and the government coming down and saying that okay, we're going to support the sector, and at that point of time, we are like one of the leading members in that. So that really accelerated in getting to the next round. So showing prototypes, showing capability, and building a decent sized team, and also government policy being convenient at the same time. All of them came together to get to the next round.
So again, I think it's a lot of other kind of combinations, but the most important thing is to have some proof points. This again, I'm talking to people, once you are at seed, Series A only happens when you have some proof points, and you probably get lucky with reforms and things like that. I'm sure Anu also went through her thing with genomics and all during one phase, not Ossimum, but Map My Genome for sure. But now, once you've reached that point, you're having dialogues with several VCs like Satish and I and a bunch of people out here. How do you pick the right one?
Actually, in our case, I don't think we had the freedom to pick the right kind of VC. Because early stage, especially, we had to go with whoever was willing to fund us. And there were a bunch of kind angels that were willing to fund us, kind and full of angels who were crazy enough to believe in us. So we didn't have a problem of picking. Now is when we are actively looking at who is the right investor, who is not the right investor. So, so one constant dilemma we have is a financial investor versus a strategic investor as well. And the reason we went with Zomato was a combination of both. So when we were looking at our way to evaluate, we were looking at how can this entity really push our business to the next level? And Zomato made sense both in terms of demand, in terms of supply, in terms of tech as well. And when we looked at other financial investors, not that we spoke to many, but we had a few offers that we could have taken. It only was pure money that was coming in, not that they had very strong backing in terms of ad tech or a vision towards what we're doing. So we would have loved to have taken Chinese capital. But that didn't exist last year, because Chinese really understand scale in what we're doing. So that would have been a no-brainer, but that didn't exist. So we've consciously taken a decision to go with Zomato versus a Western capital investor that we had.
So that's a very good point. Now coming back to you, Pawan, was there some similar kind of thought process in your mind when you chose the 51 million, or just give it to me, I'll take it?
See, again, I think same answer here. So we didn't have so much of choice. Okay. And whenever we had, choices, like let's say, two options, one of them is like far, far better than the other. So technically there's no choice for us. Right. So that way, like, there was not much thought process which went into choosing investors. Right. And also like, we were in a field where there was no thesis at all by any VC when we started off, right? So that was really crazy tough.
Do you think there is now?
Yeah, actually now raising seed round in space is, I think, 100 times easier, because after few initial seeds and series happened in the sector, a lot of interest has come in. I think most of the VCs have some sort of a thesis towards this, because of the kind of deal flow which happened over the last 4 years.
So another key takeaway, sometimes just take what you get, do a quick kind of sort and just move on, right? Because Series A is too early still. Now, when you get to the next stage, which is where you guys are getting, that's when the strategic kind of a partnership or investment or something big really matters. So we aren't talking about growth stage yet, but there are two data points. One is seed, one is Series A. You have to have a proof point, and maybe you don't have too much choice. So go with whatever capital, and maybe you can just basically, it's a gut feel saying that one investor is better than the other. Ideally, I'll pass this on to Satish right now. Ideally, by Series A, you should at least have two investors. Never bank on one investor is what my gut feel is as an entrepreneur, not as a VC. As a VC, I'd say just depend on me fully and I want to take a big chunk. But as an entrepreneur, always have more than one investor. So what do you reckon? Series A, do you need more than one investor? Does it make sense?
No, I think it's a couple of things, right? Before I address that, when an investor doesn't invest in your company, a lot of times people are disappointed. It's very common. And as an entrepreneur, you go and pitch. A lot of times it's not that VCs know your business and hence they passed. They passed because they didn't know your business. Actually that's the key reason. They couldn't get comfortable enough to invest in your business. And since they didn't have any means of getting past that line, they pass you. So it's not a rejection actually. It is really, they didn't understand. That's fine. So maybe there are other people who understand your business. Now, I think picking one or two, choosing the right one, I always say, don't raise primarily bad money for a good idea, right? At the same time, good money for a bad idea, because there's plenty of capital, capitalist commodity, investors are always fools. Don't raise money if you very well know that your business is not going to be successful eventually, because it's your opportunity cost. For an investor, it's a portfolio game. Out of 20 investments, if 3 investments follow the power law, the VC is going to get great returns, right? Or 20% IRR or whatever. They'll keep them in the business. But there are 17 other entrepreneurs, who woke up every morning working on their idea, right? So what happens to their 5 or 7 years of precious lives? So one needs to really think about that. So to me, I think go back and look for what are critical success factors for your business and what skills do you bring to the table, right? And where are the gaps? What I've seen from early on to now, I think now we're seeing founding teams that are larger with complementary skills. Early days, 2010s, we used to see 2 founders or 1 founder, both good and bad. But today we see 3-4 founders. Someone is very, very good in engineering, and they have a product marketeer as well as a salesperson. That's fantastic. They have complementary skills. So at least within the core team, they can address what is necessary for the 0 to 1 journey. So I think map out the critical success factors for your company's success and very carefully and I would say honestly assess what do you bring to the table and where the gaps are. And then go, of course, either try to bring in some people or Today, I think there are many investors who are pretty hands-on, right? I think institutional funds are also hands-on, angel investors help you, and you choose that way. And, you know, even if you dilute a person more, or if your valuation is $1 million more or less, it really does not matter. It's really about the journey and the company you keep. It's not about the destination. I think a lot of us really pay a lot of attention to that destination, but you have to realize that you'll give up the journey, right? If the journey is untenable and the company you keep is not worth it. So, but it's easy, you know, to talk about it, but when you're in front of the wheel, it's not that easy, you know, to make the decision. So that's why entrepreneurship is very tricky. And so, but you have enough help to go talk to people, especially people who have been on that path before. Don't get stuck to their biases, use your own discretion, but it's good to talk to enough number of people.
Thanks, Satish. Actually, he and I did our first startups in the Bay Area. Mine was 1992, so it's almost 30 years ago. Interesting learnings, very similar. And those days, I didn't even know what VC funding was, so I actually bootstrapped my way out. And then when I talked to they're all tier 1 VCs, they never got what I was doing. Because it was Atlassian 0.0, okay? No one knew what the hell that was. What was DevOps? Nothing, right? What do you do? Then I used to get pissed off. I said, this guy will never get it. So eventually we ended up choosing someone who got it. Okay, that was important, very important, because otherwise, again, it's bad money after a good idea, whatever, because you'll get a lot of different kind of pressure. So it's very important. In his case, I think he found some good money, but the timing was not that great because that whole .com thing happened, because he actually moved, and his company was a phenomenal company. I mean, there wouldn't be any kind of need to monitor any IT environment. It was a totally cool way to kind of do stuff, right? For any data center. But his idea was before its time, investors were pretty good. So sometimes that happens too. So don't give up, right? It's key to get that 1 or 2 investors who actually stay the journey, understand your problem to some extent initially. Later on, I think it's all about this whole ecosystem. Who will kind of come in and help you the best, right? Now, in Satish's case, he would have gone after really large kind of strategics if this company had scaled. For me, I just went after the whole like soft SLDC, sold it to BEA. I was literally lucky, okay? Otherwise, I would have actually got a bad haircut because we were valued at 150 mil, ended up selling it like at about 40 mil. In those days, which is still good, okay? But it could have been better. Because sometimes these events happen, black swan events happen, you just get wiped out. So in this time, again, the reason I'm kind of mentioning it, I got 5 minutes. People talked about this investment winter. Think of it as the time to actually dig deep as what is the value you bring? How do you preserve the value? How do you last the next 20 months, right? Which is very critical now for everyone. You raise 17 mil, you raise 51 mil. So are you going to preserve that money, Pawan?
So what we do is, so we put 3 years, so 3 years of runway, block that capital, put in an FD, don't touch it, and then spend the remaining capital or whatever you want, right? So that's what we do. So you just want to have that 3 years of minimum survival time, okay? Because anything can happen. Like you said, black swan events, regulatory environment, big competitor coming up, large landscape changes, anything, but like you said, persistence will definitely win. And so even in the downs, you should have that cash to survive. So that's what we feel. I mean, so we will definitely, have the capital enough for very long runway. So that would be our preference.
What about you?
I'll just tell you what we went through in the last 8 to 9 months, right? So right after we raised the 17 million, the idea was to spend the entire 17 million in 6 months and then do 100 mil because our existing investors committed to do the 100 mil round. And about halfway, little over halfway through the 17 million, 3 months into the spending and growing journey, we were told, whoa, things started to change. You guys need to stop. right? And we were going so fast at that point in time. Just to give a perspective, so today we are about 30,000 screens. If not for those breaks, we would have been at 100,000 screens, right? And so we had to overnight change strategy and started looking at things way differently. And investors were putting so much pressure on us to bring the burn down. At one point, we were burning almost 1.5 million per month. So we had so much pressure, and then in last 4 months, we entirely turned the ship from running after mad growth to actually making the business profitable. So
How did that happen? Did you lay some people off, or did you reduce the salaries, or what did you do? What was the trick to turn it so suddenly?
So our game is supply and demand, right? We just started moving resources from supply focus to demand focus, and automatically the business turned profitable. So that's also a good thing about our business, that we could do that. So
no inventory lock-in this time.
No. So for us, I mean, the suggestion that I would probably give is very similar to what Pawan has given, right? So not all businesses can turn profitable overnight. I've seen some of my friends' businesses who virtually are now out of cash, who couldn't stop the momentum of growth.
This is a very important. Cash is king. Tough times, make sure you have a runway. The investors always say runway, but just basically make sure that you have the staying power, and then reduce down to the core value, whatever you're delivering, because you can't do everything in a tough time. Now, we have about 3 or 4 minutes. We can take 1 or 2 questions. Yeah.
So I think, Srikanth, I want to highlight one thing, right? So I was just analyzing why did really good companies raise very little capital and then go public 20 years ago versus now, right? Who are guzzling billions of dollars. I do feel that there is what is called as a digital commodity at play. Actually, except few, many products and services you develop do not have huge barriers of entry. Others can also roll out these. It's not a big deal. I mean, I'm not talking about space tech, but many others. So an incumbent develops a product service, sells to the customer, and now because of glut of capital, many companies in the same sector get funded. They all go confuse the customer. Customer leverages them to beat up the incumbent on price. So it's really not overall market growth. It's really someone's churn is someone's growth. And so an entrepreneur has to be very, very, very cautious about this particular phenomenon. So that, when you're entering something, I'm not saying all of you should build IP companies, but you need to understand what's your moat. And you need to make sure that you're one of the top 3 players in that sector, right? I think this winter will ensure that a lot of Me Too companies will die. Frothy companies will settle down at much lower valuations, which is a great thing, which is a great thing.
Good for us.
Entrepreneurs, absolutely, it's a great thing for entrepreneurs. But that's
also for investors, right?
Yeah. I don't know about investors, but for entrepreneurs, yes. Yeah.
No, actually, we have time for at least 1 or 2 questions before we. Thanks, Mansi, for giving us that time. So please, there's one raised hand there, and he may need a mic.
Yeah, hi, my name is Uttam. I'm a co-founder of a company we founded recently, and we're in the stage of raising funds. My question is to earlier what you said. Sometimes you pitch, and if you are not able to really convey your idea, that could be a reason. Or also, if the investor is not able to really understand your space, or not able to see the same value you see, or they're candid about or admit that, let's say, I'm not able to understand your technology enough to validate what you're claiming or where you want to go. It's really realistic, or if it's a science project. So if it's stuck in that, one way to tackle it is build prototypes and proofs of concept, which we are attempting. What are the other ways that I can adopt to make it more appealing to an investor? How to entice them to learn more about your idea?
You want anyone specific to answer?
So I don't want to answer this because I know Uttam. So I
No, I think, you have to look at your local ecosystem. So many times I keep saying this, right? As much as an investor does diligence on you, you need to do diligence on the investor. And with, the kind of insights and information that's available to you, you have to pick and choose who are those 5, 7, 10 people that you could go to. And today, investment sans boundaries, right? I think even people from US or people from, if Singapore take that leap of faith, to write a $50 million, many of the local, it's not that money is not here, but they could not take that leap of faith or did not understand. So I think apart from prototypes and then IP and patents, all of that, I think having a great advisory board helps. And doing the diligence and then going to the right set of investors will also help, because that's how you kind of cut through the chase, and then you would know whether you would be able to raise the money or not.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would say the answer is quite simple. In fact, that's what Skyroot did, So at no point there was an investor who understood everything at what we do. So what we did, in fact, and the learning from our journey was that go to investors who can take those very big, bold risks, who think that even if the investment goes off, they could take such, big risk, even if, let's say, nothing works out. You should go to those investors and spend your time, especially, for example, if you see the Skyroot journey, either very wealthy individuals invested in us or sovereign wealth funds invested in us. Everybody who could take huge, bold risks without, fearing much about the loss, but still who had the faith that these guys are going to pull it off. So I think go to the people who can take that very large risk, even though they may not be the best persons to validate those concepts.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pawan. Actually, that is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is actually spend some time and find the right investor, because certain businesses lend themselves to a long-term, large ticket size. Say, for example, Skyroot. But if I was writing the next generation compiler, okay, I really don't need that. I just need a guy who's done it before. And he'll understand it. I can do it for a very small sum of money, but the leverage will be tremendous, right? So if I got Bill Joy to invest, for example, I'll be happy. Just one example. Are we out of time, Mansi? One more question, please. Lovely. Oh,
Okay, if nobody had, I would have.
So, hello, sir. I'm a young entrepreneur. As I think, I'm studying my BTech in the JNTH, the Kukatpally campus, and I had an idea in the prototype which is related to the aqua sector, and I had a startup called the Aquatech Foundation. In that, how to increase the B2B and idea assessment in the B2C, as the B2B and the B2C are both are the different paths. How to identify the profits, as which is better, the B2Bs or the B2C? In the track, how we can say?
I think it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're going to reach out to consumers, obviously it's B2C and you're going to spend a lot more. And it's a very, very bad time to kind of pitch a B2C idea when there's a funding winter, because you'll need money.
Yes.
So I see, fundamentally, I've been an enterprise tech guy, SaaS guy, right?
Yes.
So if you ask me, even now, I don't understand B2C that well.
Yes, sir.
Having been an investor for a long time. so I would kind of say the closest guy to B2C is here. So please.
So I'll just give you my friend's startup example. We are also B2B business. I don't know too much about B2C. So they're a health monitoring device, contactless health monitoring device called Dozy. Satish might be knowing them. So they first went with a B2C approach. They realized that the market is super difficult to crack because you need a lot of money in customer education, branding and all. And then they've taken a turn to sell to people who really understand the product well, where they've identified a fit and they started running with it with the businesses. I think if you're in a situation like that, take a pause and analyze how much money do you have, what way. Profitability, I think, is always sooner with B2B, in my opinion. So, but it totally depends on your product.
Thank you all. I think with that we are done because we are expecting the esteemed Honorable Minister here. So we have to get off the stage very, very quickly. Thank you all.
I thank all the panelists for sharing your wisdom, real-time experiences and insights. I request Srinivas Kolipara sir to please give a token of appreciation to our wonderful panelists.
Start. What plant is this? I don't know. What plant is it? Really? Is it a rubber plant or a money plant? Looks like a money plant. Yeah, money. That's a money plant, by the way.
If you ask me if it is the journey or the destination that is really important, I believe it's the people that accompany you right from the very beginning to the end that really matter. So I thank each one of you for being here today. With this, we come to the very end of the first part of our day. I request all the delegates to move towards the open lounge to have high tea and network to enrich your net worth. Thank you.
To the 7th Foundation Day celebrations at T-Hub. Thank you for gracing this night with your presence to celebrate the success of our startups and the spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation. Over the last 7 years, T-Hub has been pioneering the Indian startup ecosystem, and in our new avatar as world's largest innovation campus, we want to transcend the innovation to the global horizons. I, Priyanka Ravla from T-Hub, once again welcome the gathering to the awards night, the plethora of celebration for the spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation. Now, I would like to invite our beloved CEO, MSR, to give the welcome remarks.
Today, I think is a legacy of the vision, the leadership, the far-sightedness. First of all, of our Chief Minister, Minister Garu, Jayesh Garu, our board members, in conceiving of this institution. Today, as you know, we've been in this building now for close to 4 months. The new T-Hub 2.0, I keep telling people, the game has just begun. Right? So we've played a good game so far, but the game ahead of us is going to be super interesting. And as I was saying earlier in the afternoon, we're trying to climb Everest. We've got to base camp. There's so much more we need to do to really get Hyderabad, Telangana, its rightful place in the sun. So I think it's been 7 years of learning, 7 years of collaboration, 7 years of success, 7 years of empowering entrepreneurs, and 7 years also of some failures, right? The first question I keep getting asked is, how many unicorns have you produced? So I obviously try and deflect that question by saying, listen, we are in the business of empowering entrepreneurs, creating value, then creating jobs. I hope in the near future we'll get some unicorns and you'll see some of them in the hour to follow. So at T-Hub, what we're trying to now do is try and make our programs. So as you know, in this new building, we have right now about 260 startups in the building. And we are also working with about 200 startups who are outside the building through our programs. We hope by the middle of next year, all the 5 floors which have still to be furnished will be completed. And at full capacity, we'll have close to about 800 startups in the building. So effectively, we'll probably impact close to about 1100 startups on a cumulative basis. What we've been trying to do is to see how we can really add value to our community. How do we really add value to our entrepreneurs? So one of the things which we've been seized of is everything we do, we should be able to measure, right? I think Minister Garu is a big believer in metrics, in quantitative and qualitative metrics for driving outcomes. So in that context, we came up with a framework, list of things which are easy to remember, simplistic framework, but something which I think kind of is starting to resonate. So the framework we use is what we call the 6 M's, which is how do we help our startups get market access, which is the most important thing for a startup. How do we help them get access to money, right, which is required once you get past the initial friends, family, relatives, bootstrapping around. How do we help them get high quality mentors, right, who've been there, done that, and can support them? How do we help them get talent, right? So for example, yesterday we had an internship mela. We had about 70 of our startups. We had 2,000 students, and we got a lot of support from our ecosystem. I don't know if Charan is here in the hall somewhere, but they worked with our team as one, and we got, I think, 400 young people got internship opportunities. We need to do a lot more of that. And then, of course, the last two aspects, which are softer, are one is around what we call motivation and mindset, right? So everyone who's been an entrepreneur knows it's a long, tough journey. Sometimes can be very lonely, and you can learn from people who've been there, done that before, and can, you can learn from their mistakes, and hopefully, obviously, you'll make new ones as you go along. And the last one is about methodologies. So what we've tried to do is to reimagine our programs. How do we make them much more impactful, much more outcome oriented is what we are trying to drive at. So I think when I think about Telangana, I think Minister Garu keeps referring to Telangana as a startup state. I think the life of an entrepreneur is similar to that of a startup state in many ways, right? And many things in common. So for example, you need to have passion to innovate. You need to have patience. You need to persevere. You need to have what I call curiosity, which is very important because you need to keep learning new things. You need to be highly self-driven, and you need to have a desire to serve, common to building a state and common to building a business. So I think the entrepreneurs whom you are going to meet today, we have 26 of them. So we have 9 who are across general categories, we call them, and then 17 entrepreneurs across different sectors: healthcare, mobility, agri-tech, food, space tech, etc., whom we are going to recognize. So I think this is the beginning. I do believe many of them have the potential, not just from a valuation metric. I think we had some great panel discussions earlier today. We had two of our biggest VCs who were sitting here in the second row. We had our entrepreneurs. They said, don't worry about valuation. You focus on building lasting, sustainable businesses, and the value will follow. Right? So that's a cue for us. So just quickly trying to summarize upfront, what is it that we are trying to do at T-Hub? So we see our role as an ecosystem orchestrator, not just an incubator. We are trying to, obviously, while I think there's been a lot of, obviously there's a lot of merit in the saying that money will follow good entrepreneurs, but we are doing everything we can to see how we can get more institutional investors to, first of all, get a understanding of what is happening in Hyderabad, of the great businesses which are getting built in Hyderabad, many of whom you will meet shortly, for those of you who have not met them before, and try to get them to start investing in these companies. So that's one part about enabling scale by institutional capital. The second thing which we are doing a lot of is around building communities and partnerships, right? So we've started a community for Web 3.0. We'll soon be launching an initiative on quantum computing. We launched India's first semiconductor community about a month ago, right? So we'll see a lot more in, particularly in areas where we think we can take a leadership position apart from the well-known sectors like healthcare, mobility, enterprise tech, and so on. Our focus is going to be on everything we do, we should be able to measure, right? I'm maybe a little old-fashioned. What you cannot measure, you can't manage, right? So focus on driving metrics for outcomes. And last but not least, we are also conscious of our obligation to ensure that the spirit of entrepreneurship is not just limited to Hyderabad, but it also spreads into other districts. So we're working here with, where is Vijay? Yeah, Vijay here. He's promised to help us get started in the IT towers, and we'll start that this quarter. As you also know that we are already working in advanced conversations with 3 other states, and we hope to get started sometime in the early new year with those states. So with that, thank you for coming, and look forward to meeting many of you over after the session is over. And I want to again place on record our deep, heartfelt appreciation of all the tremendous support we get from the government, particularly from the Minister Garu, from Jayesh Garu, in building out this ecosystem. Thank you. It's now my pleasure. Yeah. It's now my pleasure and privilege to call on stage our Honorable Minister for IT, Municipal Administration and Development Industries, KTR Garu. Principal Secretary, IT and Industries and Commerce, Jayesh Garu. And our board member and Director Triple IT, Professor PJ Narayan, onto stage for the awards.
Next to excellence is the appreciation of
Next to excellence is the appreciation of it. On the occasion of this wonderful gathering, we feel honored in recognizing and appreciating our startups. We have 9 special categories of growth, bootstrapping, most innovative, resilience, women-led, so on and so forth. Then we have specific sector categories also where we are awarding the startups. I invite the entrepreneurs who are AI-powered integrated health benefits platform helping organizations, employees with a preventive, predictive and highly personalized healthcare solution. And they have been our star startup today in Telangana. It's none other than Ekin Care. They have raised total funding of around 21 million USD and they are serving 500 plus organizations. Let's clap our hands to the next recipients from the same category who are the manufacturers of India's first electric tractors. They are none other than Celestial E-Mobility. They are also being awarded as Star Startup Telangana 2022. Unfortunately, they could not be here. Request MSR. Oh, okay. Oh, great. Siddharth from Celestial, please. Yes. As entrepreneurs, we all aim for growth, and this award is to recognize one such startup who has shown immense growth, leading them to raise 2 million in pre-series A. Our T-Hub startup itself, TurboHire. As a high growth startup category, T-Hub 2022. Less. Now I invite Smart Winner, a T-Hub startup, the world's #1 mobile first sales productivity platform. They are getting the Bootstrap Champ because they have raised their venture and turned out to be champions in marketing, making their revenue of 1 million to receive the Bootstrap Champ award. Coming up next, we have the category of Comeback Champ 2022, and the award goes to Prospect AI. It's always about how we come back and not how we been in low sides. Now, let's recognize that startup which has disrupted the startup ecosystem, going through challenges and redefining and reshaping themselves. Next, we want to appreciate our T-Hub startup that is working in the space that is helping women move ahead, providing an honest and free choice to all the menstruators to have comfortable and safe periods. Let me be a health and wellness brand to receive the Women Ahead 2022 award. Resilience comes from the lessons and skills we absorb as we grow. Now, there's one such startup over the 7 years who have been part of T-Hub, our own Lab 32 startup, Monitra, who seeks to address the world's pressing health problems using medical data driving insights insights to shape healthcare delivery. Coming up next category, we have Most Promising Innovation 2022 Award going to Blue Jay, who envisioned to make flying simple and sustainable. They are also a T-Hub startup and are also funded through T-Fund. Our next category, we have Top Innovator 2022 Award again for Perceptine, a deep tech robotic startup building dual arm robots that are low cost and conceptually intelligent. Now I invite those who have raised a 51 million US dollar fund, Series B funding round, the largest in the Indian space tech. It's none other than Skyroot, leading space tech startup 2022. D2C, right? We all know D2C is the most happening space and segment of the market today. Successfully, this startup has been only footwear brand to disrupt the space by creating comfortable wear with recycled plastic bottles, recycled tires, organic cotton. It's none other than under leading online D2C startup award, we have Niemann. We invite Niemann under the category of Leading Online D2C Startup Award 2022.
Say slowly that they are not.
Okay. Scaling globally is every startup's long-term goal. Under Scaling Heights Globally category, we have Roadmetrics, a deep tech startup on a mission to map road and street data at scale. Request MSR to collect the award on behalf of Roadmetrics. In India, groceries are delivered in 10 minutes, but ambulances take 45 minutes time. This one startup is focusing on 8-minute ambulance paradigm, and it's none other than Stanplus under the category Emerging Healthcare Startup 2022. Coming next, we have Startup under Most Promising Health Tech Startup 2022 Award. The award goes to Onward Assist, which helps improve cancer treatment outcomes by solving the problems of accurately and timely cancer pathology diagnosis and simplifying the process. Now let's invite T-Hub supported Emerging Tech Healthcare Startup Portal under Emerging Tech Healthcare 2022 category. Now, we want to recognize our T-Angel startup, which is supported by Y Combinator and who have raised 500k USD, PayCrunch, a UPI-based credit line for Gen Z. Most promising fintech startup 2022. Let's recognize one more startup from the fintech sector who has been rapidly democratizing finance with their marketplace for loans and helping people with their financial products. It's none other than My Money Comma to receive the fastest growing fintech startup award 2022. Building an ecosystem for consumers to shift, engage, and retain in healthy lifestyle, Swap has stood as the most promising in the food tech space. I invite Swap to receive the award of Most Promising Food Tech Startup 2022. Now I invite Our Food, disrupting the traditional centralized food processing industry by establishing a network of farmer franchises across different parts of the geography as the most promising agri-tech startup 2022. Let's invite Banyan Nation, one of the India's vertically integrated plastic recycling companies that helps global brands use more recycled plastic instead of normal plastic, to receive Leading Social Enterprise Startup Award 2022. Let's invite our own Lab 32 startup, Aviro's world's first video AI marketplace with applications on facial recognition, crowd and vehicle counting under the category of Most Promising Smart City Startup 2022. You want that? Next, I invite Rozgar Card, a social impact job platform that sources and creates access for blue-collar workers to employment opportunities under the category of Workforce Enablement Startup Award 2022. Hi. Rozgar Card under Workforce Enablement Startup Award 2022. KTR survey. No. Now I invite our T-Hub funded and our co-working startup who has been promising a SaaS-based enterprise, Blue Copa, a finance operations automation platform under the category of Most Promising Enterprise SaaS Startup 2022. This startup has automated construction using drones and helmet monitoring systems that augments project managers' construction made easier. Construction to receive the Most Promising Construction Tech Startup Award 2022.
See.
30,000 plus local location access, deep tech products, fully developed in-house equipment. They are none other than Race Energy, building the world's largest battery swapping network across. I invite Race Energy to receive the leading EV startup award. Good, no? Last but not least, we want to encourage the budding startup, our own EV startup who has been promising and mission to change the way we move with their innovative e-bicycles. Most Promising EV Startup Category 2022, Erman Automotive.
Our Minister Garu to please speak and inspire our young audience.
I'm going to speech anyway. Good evening. I think I tweeted about a couple of weeks ago that I can't read without my reading glasses, so I'm going to have a tough time. But I'll act like I'm able to read everything and you'll pretend like you're able to also process everything, all right? Good evening. Thank you, to the entire team of T-Hub. It's always a pleasure. It's always great, a feeling of great pride when I come back to T-Hub because, it's like seeing your kid growing up. PJN was just telling me, he was very fondly reminiscing that on 2000, was it? Right, 6th June. See, the state of Telangana was formed on the 2nd of June, 2014. And I think exactly 2 days or 3 days later, myself and my then IT secretary, Harpreet Singh, and there was somebody else, I don't remember who. We were all at ISB, the Indian School of Business. And then we had a meeting with PJN and his team of Triple IT. We had Ajit was then, Ajit Rangnekar, I don't know where he is now. Is he here? Rangnekar was the dean of ISB. And then there was a bunch of us, including Srini and others, who all, initially sat there, were trying to process, understand a little bit about innovation, try and understand, what needs to be done in Hyderabad, etc. One of the questions very innocuously that I asked, I think that may have been very naive at that point of time to all those who gathered around. I said, you know, what is the X factor that Bangalore has, which Hyderabad doesn't? You know, why is it that we see, this whole coinage of Silicon Valley and, a city of startups, etc., etc., an entire sheen around Bangalore, not in Hyderabad and other cities. So then we started thinking. We said, what are the elements that Hyderabad is missing? And then, we started thinking, and then that's how PJN was gracious. He said, we have a bare shell in IIIT campus that you can use to set up possibly India's largest technology incubator. So that's how the whole concept of T-Hub evolved over a couple of hours of conversation. And I was super delighted because, PJN offered me something that was readily available almost. All we needed to do was basically spruce it up, do up the interiors and get going. So that's how 2015, on the 5th of November, exactly 7 years ago, the first building of T-Hub was launched. Once it came into being, I think it spurred a lot of chatter, spurred a lot of conversations, it spurred a lot of very interesting discussions among the youngsters, among entrepreneurs, among the startup community that a government is actually driving. Because if you look around the world, very, very rarely do you see governments actually playing the role of enablers. Governments typically come out with policies. Governments typically come out with regulatory compliances. In fact, governments more often than not end up being stiflers. If you look at what's happening in the Web3 and crypto world today, I think you would agree with me. Governments typically end up being the stiflers of innovation in a lot of ways. Because, typically we tend to say, okay, this is not right, that is not right, and, we should not be doing this, there are lines you don't cross, etc., etc. That kind of tends to put a huge roadblock on innovation. But in our case, what we did was we put together a cross-sectional team with the best minds from the government, industry and academia coming together to build a truly world-class institution. And today when PJN was complimenting me and telling me that, he fondly remembers and recollects days we had met in 2014, I am also equally proud and equally happy that it is shaped up so well and, so beautifully. But I think as MS put it, where is he? Right. As MS put it, I think we've just reached the base camp. I think we have, the entire Mount Everest, the summit to conquer. We have so much to scale, so much to grow. And I don't think I'll have the luxury of calling my state a startup state for very long, because the state has now been around for 8+ years. So I think there comes a time when you have to start growing up also. Can't be called a startup anymore. So therefore, my ambition and our ambition, I think collective ambition of all of us should be to really scale that summit and to make Hyderabad truly, I wouldn't want to call it a Silicon Valley, somewhat of an equivalent of a Silicon Valley. And now I do believe that we also have done some good work, and therefore we're rated by Startup Genome Report among the top 10 cities in the global ecosystem in the affordable talent. We are rated also by the same report among the top 15 in the Asian ecosystem for funding. We are also rated among the top 15 in the global ecosystem for bang for buck category. I think that really matters and deserves a big round of applause. Not just to T-Hub, not just to the T-Hub team here, but to the entire startup ecosystem in Hyderabad. I think we have just started. I think we really have a long way to go, but I think the start has been good. The beginning is, like they say, well begun is half done. The awards ceremony that we just concluded also showcased some of the best and brightest of our startups at various stages of their life cycle in a wide spectrum of sectors, because I was looking at food tech companies, I was also looking at construction tech startups, space tech, people in retail, so robotics. Very, very impressed and personally delighted with the depth of the startup ecosystem, that has been shaping up in Hyderabad and Telangana. But I do believe that this recognition that was just conferred will also further enthuse the 6,000+ startups in Hyderabad and Telangana to actually have larger goals and larger ambitions and to be best in the class. Happy to also share with you that, like MS said, wherever I go, whenever I showcase the T-Hub building, the question that I get asked is, beyond the cool interiors and the very cool, ultra uber exterior, what have you achieved? That's the question I keep getting asked. I think the biggest takeaway for me and for the government has been, while we have spent hundreds of crores, funding this world's largest technology incubator, the biggest takeaway for me and a personal delight for me has been the impact T-Hub has been able to create on the startup ecosystem. It's not just the incubatees here. It's not just the startups who've come here, who've gotten funding, which also is quite good. But I think the impact of T-Hub has not just been felt in Telangana alone, but it has now become sort of a role model to the rest of the country. We have ministers from various states in India coming to us, asking us. Srini was just telling me how our MOU that we signed with Goa government back in 2017, if I remember correctly, or 2018, with the then Chief Minister Lakshmikant Parsekar, who was also the IT Minister then, is now shaping up rather well and is now actually, giving room for Goa also to start working on something very similar to T-Hub. Likewise, we have had another 8 different Indian states who had come forward, who actually wanted to learn, understand how T-Hub was done by the government and how this actually can become an exemplar for their states as well. We've impacted more than 2,000 startups through various programs and initiatives, that is T-Hub alone, approached over 600 corporates for innovation programs, and have created a pool of more than 100 plus mentors who are tasked with nurturing the next generation of entrepreneurs. We're happy to share also that till date, more than 1.9 billion US dollars in funding has been raised by T-Hub cohort startups. The world-class infrastructure, supported by a strong ecosystem, is attracting entrepreneurs from across India. We also have fruitfully collaborated with many key partners and government entities such as Department of Science and Technology, Niti Aayog, IDEX, METI, corporates, academic institutions such as ISB, IIT Hyderabad, various other IITs, NALSAR, and also ecosystem enablers such as TIE, HICIA, FTCCI, etc. And we also, of course, by way of collaboration, have coordinated and collaborated with a number of other incubators from across India and across the world as well. T-Hub also represents not just the entrepreneurial zeal, but also the values we cherish, values of integrity, humility, excellence, collaboration, and of course, innovation. By bringing all these jigsaw pieces of the puzzle together, we aim to break the silos and ensure that Hyderabad is the go-to place for any entrepreneur in India and possibly by extension in the world as well. Very recently, I think last week, we've had the entire team of bureaucracy led by our Chief Secretary, do a workshop here, a day-long workshop in T-Hub, which was hosted by my very able Principal Secretary, Jayesh Ranjan. I'd like to thank him because, the feedback I've gotten with Jayesh's presentation and the entire ecosystem's participation, particularly being led by T-Hub, was so good. In fact, one of the principal secretaries wrote a message to me saying, typically in the world of bureaucracy, innovation is a word that we don't hear very often. And when we were at T-Hub and when we interacted with all the startups, now we are excited to also elevate our game. We are excited also to bring in the innovation angle into our sphere of work so that we can contribute more to this state that has been growing brilliantly. Our finance, Special Chief Secretary Finance called me particularly, and he told me something very, very exciting. He said, the state of Telangana, gross state domestic product has increased from 5,06,000 crores in 2014 to 11.55 lakh crores in 2021. But what he said was something even more exciting. He said, sir, we grew at 11% on an average, despite COVID, despite a lot of other challenges. But he said, if we can only grow 4% more by way of, and if that 4% can come by way of incremental innovation, then this 11.55 lakh crore of GSDP can become 30 lakh crore in the next 5 years. So that is the ability, that is the kind of, tangential intervention that innovation can bring in, even into government. So I'm super delighted that not only has the private sector and youngsters and startups have been enthused and impacted by T-Hub. Even the governments, we are typically called the most jaded, in the political class, the bureaucracy. We get laughed at, we get scoffed at. We are not taken very seriously by the startup community. But I can tell you, even we are kicked up about the whole idea of bringing in the element of innovation into our sphere of life. And I've been saying this many times, but let me say it again. For all the startups in T-Hub, I've promised you before, and I have asked my Chief Secretary and Principal Secretary IT as well to reiterate, and I'll reiterate again on my personal behalf as well. Government will be your first customer. We will give you a proof of concept should there be that need. So please reach out to us. But the expectations of us are huge. Like MS said, we have just reached the base camp and we have built beautiful buildings, infrastructure, platform for young Indians to come innovate. But I think since the expectations in terms of impact, expectations in terms of the sustainable enterprises that are created, number of jobs, most importantly, because we are a growing country, a growing economy, growing state, we need more and more jobs being created. Because as we all know, today's startup is tomorrow's large MNC, which creates millions and millions of jobs. Complex societal problems being solved by way of innovation, even complex problems of governance being addressed in terms of better citizen grievance redressal. So, all in all, the expectations are high, and my compliments to the entire team of T-Hub, to all those who worked from day one, to the team that's working now. Onwards and upwards, and I look forward to many, many more anniversaries and many, many more of these celebrations. Thank you. Jai Telangana.
Thank you so much, sir, for those wonderful words of inspiration. We will surely one day be better than Silicon Valley. I hope and wish that dream comes true with all the partners and everyone here together. Now, I would like to welcome Anish, who is the CDO of T-Hub. He's pivoted himself from being a Kargil veteran, Indian Air Force pilot, to being entrepreneur and helped startup MyGate to build 2 multi-million companies as well. As part of our 6M2P framework, we would like to present our impactful and metric-driven startup programs, showcase our value partners, and pay gratitude to our mentors. Floor is all yours, Anish.
Thank you, Priyanka. I think, like the minister rightly said, right? It's time for the building to show what can be done inside the building, right? We need to move more the narrative into what is happening inside the building. We will focus on 3 things essentially, right? The first is the methodology piece, right? What happens next? Startups, today, around 87,000 startups are registered in India, right? And only around 4,700 odd startups have raised some kind of funding, which means that they've got some kind of a market validation. That means around 94% of the startups today are not getting market validation in some form or the other. How can we reduce that percentage, right? And that is what we want to build in everything inside the building. The first aspect is that of methodology. What do I do next? So we have identified saying that in the life of a startup, from the idea stage to the IPO stage, there are many breakpoints where a startup seems to be failing. So we've identified these breakpoints. For example, if you have an idea, right? How to make sure that there is a solid business model behind it, even before you start spending on a product, right? So from the idea stage, how do you create a product stage? From the product, how do you get market validation? From market validation, how do I get you business ready? From business readiness, how do I get you to funding readiness? Right? At all of these places, what we try to do is you try to get an intervention of a methodology. We put you through a course. We design the course correct, specific to that need. So we have designed something called 100 days to anything, which means we have a 100-day course to get how your product ready. We have a 100-day course to how to get your business model ready. A 100-day course to how to get your funding readiness. If I have to give you an example, right? There's a doctor. He knows that there's a medical problem. He knows the solution to his problem, but he is not upskilled enough to create a product out of it. So that is where we come in and try to get him ready and run him through a product readiness program. Now, once he had his product ready, how does he take it to the market? How does he validate with the market? How does he do his pricing right? Does he identify his user right? Does he identify his client right?
It might be somebody who might be using it, but somebody else is paying for it. How does he identify these points? So we get a funding, a business readiness program, right? And all of these interventions is entirely programmatic, designed to increase the probability of success. So when we realized like MSR rightly said, it's all about metrics, numbers, how you look at numbers, how you look at numbers from different directions. So we did an outreach and called for startups. We realized that there are so many potential startups outside. So the first step is to identify the startup which have the highest probability of success. Today, all our courses have an acceptance rate of 4%, which means for a cohort size of 20, we get approximately 500 applicants. Now, this cohort size of 20, we understand that there are two interventions that need to be required, right? One is that we need to have a really very strong program. And second, we need to ensure that startup founders, despite their busy schedules, engage with the program. So all of our programs have got 8 topics, depending on what program you are choosing to sign up for. If you're a product readiness program, the interventions will be different. The topics will be different. Now, each of the topic, for example, if you're a part of the Lab 32 program, it's a 100-day programs. We take 8 topics there. One could be your price discovery, one could be your go-to-market, one could be all of those things. Each one for 1 week. And each week you have 4 interventions. The first one is a classroom session, right? We call the best of the industry out there. We could have professors from ISB. If it's a product program, we have professors from IIT, Triple IT coming and doing those classroom sessions, right? The next intervention on the same topic is from a unicorn founder. They come and they tell me, how did I solve my go-to-market program? He brings his experience of turning into a $1 billion company onto the table to those startups. The third intervention is that we have a lot of these worksheets which happens. So we assigned one mentor who has done exactly that. If you're a fintech startup, if you have a fintech startup who wants go-to-market ready, so we get you a fintech mentor who has done go-to-market for the past 25 years. He sits along with you and he then does your entire worksheet with you. And on the final intervention is where you sum up everything and your go-to-market ready is ready. Next topic, next topic, next topic. So in 100 days, you are really ready to come out into the market. The second most important thing is, how do I get the founders to engage with the program? So we, depending sure on their engagement, we bucket them into red, amber, green. So if you are engaging more than 80% with all my initiatives, then you fall in the green bucket. And going back to analytics, we have realized that typically any startup which is in the green bucket, during that 100-day period, he's seen a revenue growth of 400%. He's seen a pipeline growth, sales pipeline growth of 7x, that is 700%. And at the end of the cohort, he has received on an average 3 offers for funding. So we go back and tell the startups, listen, if you want me to create impact for you, you need to engage with me. So I have got a great selection criteria. I have got a great program. I run engagement with the founders, and hence what comes out will be a really great startup which comes out. So this is how we run our methodology. That is one of the 6 M's that MSR was mentioning. The second one is mentorships. We understand the importance of mentorship. We understand that we cannot run typical programs, interventions, right? If there is a fintech startup for, let's again go to market or sales, I will not be able to run a cohort for fintech startups, right? So we engage them with really high quality mentors. We've got around 170 odd mentors today. We have a selection criteria for mentors, which means that all of these mentors are at least senior VPs or C-suites and above. If they are coming from a founder background, we see that they are at least raised a couple of rounds of funding, which means they have progressed into some sort of validation from the market of their business models, and they're bringing actual value onto the market. So so on an average, every cohort engages with around 170 hours of mentorship, of really high quality mentorship. While on one hand, we are providing value for the startups from the mentors, we understand that there is also need to provide value for the mentors by virtue of engaging with the startups. The first thing that the mentors realized is that by engaging with these startups, they are engaging with the frontier tech of what is going on in their industry. Which means that technology today is, this is how startups look at technology, right? There are multiple building blocks of technology. AI, AR, VR, MR, AI, MI, and all of these building blocks, computer vision, neural networking, and all of that, IoT and all of that. Startups today are using these individual technologies in different or multiple combinations to come out with a solution. It is not possible for any one corporate to have domain expertise in all of these in their company. And it's also not possible for a full-time senior vice president or anything to find out how startups in his domain are creating new technologies or new solutions. So they get access to really cutting-edge frontline technologies developments which are happening. The mentors also get a lot of access to T-Hub, all of T-Hub's facilities, all of T-Hub's amenities, and so on and so forth. Right? So that is the second piece where we really realize the value of mentors who are contributing to T-Hub. The last part is, throughout the journey, a startup has multiple requirements, right? He has the requirements, for example, he has a cloud requirements, right? He has cloud requirements where he wants cloud storage, he wants cloud computing, he wants testing, he wants developing platform. It could be a BFSI requirement. He wants banking, he wants financial, he wants insurance. He has 5 people. An insurance agency typically will not be able to give him insurance that he gives for a 5,000 people company. So how do I leverage this scale to build value or get value to that 5-member startup, right? So what we did is we categorized these requirements into 13 categories. Every category has got 3-4 subcategories depending on the category, and every subcategory has got 3 or 4 vendors which we have selected who give us a great deal. What does that mean? It means that today if a startup engages with T-Hub, the day he engages, he gets an onboarding package. You get approximately $10,000 of AWS credit. You get $10,000 of $5,000 of HubSpot credit, for example, and so on and so forth. So when you start, the first time you engage with T-Hub, you walk off with somewhere close to around $20,000, $25,000 worth of credits, which you can actually use to start your business. And how are we thinking at a full end value services, which means that we have signed up, for example, we have signed up with Uber, we have signed up with Oyo, we have signed up with Hard Rock Cafe, and we signed up with a travel partner. So if my startup lands in Delhi, he gets into an Uber, he gets an X% discount. He checks into an Oyo, he gets an X% discount. He has his meeting, he gets an X% discount in Starbucks, and he wants to book his flight ticket back. He again gets a discounted price back. So I think all of this is how we are looking at an end-to-end partnership for all of our startups. So the aim of this building is to create that entire environment inside the building. If I want to get my pitch deck ready, I've got 7 VCs in the building. I just walk across the corridor, show my pitch deck to him and tell him, sir, where are my holes? Tell me where do I need to plug? Tell me what is going on in the market, how are investors looking at pitch decks today? Right? He wants his Google trades, he comes here. He wants legal support, right? We've signed up with legal support. Adam, HR, legal, finance, compliance, accounting, auditing, you name it, we've got partners for all of them. Right? So I think that is how T-Hub is starting to build value for all of his startups at any intervention. So I probably will rest my case here. And please, if there is any requirement that you can ever think of, please reach out to T-Hub for any support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anish. Now I welcome Jay sir to launch the Menti handbook. Request KTR Garu to come onto the stage to unveil the Mentor-Mentee handbook and guidelines.
So as a part of our mentorship program, what we've realized is that both the mentors and the mentees need guidelines on how to approach with each other. So what we realized is we have created a mentor handbook, which is the do's, don'ts, best practices of how they should be engaging with mentors, and a mentee handbook on what to do and what not to do when they are engaging with mentors. Sumail.
Just one last. One last thing before Minister Garu has other obligations. So before he goes, so I just want to announce today a very important day in the history of T-Hub. We are launching a partnership with an entity called Redberry, which is based out of Chicago. The intent of this is to basically create co-create innovation programs, give our startups a soft landing in Chicago. And this we are doing in partnership with a large entity called Redberry. There's an entrepreneur called Deepak Vyas from our very own Telangana, who's been actively working with us for the last 9 months. So this is going to be our first, significant soft landing post in the holy land of the US. So I'd like to thank, first of all, Jayesh Garu for our support and Minister Garu for our support in getting this going. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.